I think everybody can hear what we say anyways, because if I speak here and I go like this, you guys can still hear me probably through the other mics, right? Yeah. So going like this doesn't actually make what we say secret.
Sorry, it's not a secret.
It sounds great on camera, though, I'm sure.
All right,
Everybody gets a little closer to their TVs.
Welcome everyone to this evening's meeting of the Monadnock Regional School District School Board. We'll get started with public comments. Do we have anyone signed up for public comments, Laura? All right. Do we have a student government report? Can we do we have student government representatives? And who would we ask if we would like to have student government representatives? How would we get them?
Does that sound okay to you guys out there?
Coffee maker?
All right.
All right, now you can tell all the secret stuff.
All right. Do we need to take a recess to try to resolve the audio issues? No. All right, good. We're interested in having student government representatives. Lisa Spencer, how would we go about making that happen?
Met and formed on a new group because the old advisor left, so the new advisor just met on Tuesday, so I can reach out to Mr. Harrison. Kelly Messenger, who's the president, and see basis.
Okay, that was Lisa Spencer, principal of Monadnock Regional High School. She was explaining to us that Mr. Harrison is the advisor for student government, and Tally is the representative that we had last year. We're looking forward to having some information from them on who's going to be attending meetings this year based on the fact that they just met for the first time. Cheshire Career Center agreement is our first action item for this evening. We all have copies of this in our packets. Are there any questions on this? We do need to have a motion to approve and a second and discussion if we want to take care of this evening.
I would make the motion to accept the agreement.
Second.
Yeah, Rod.
I just would like to hear from perhaps Jeremy, the type of numbers we're talking about, not dollars and cents. How many students?
Yeah, so student-wise, it's no secret our enrollment is low right now, and we attribute that to mostly scheduling difficulties with the team and the Cheshire Career Center and trying to get it up. So right now, we're hovering right around 40 kids that are able to access the Career Center. And like I said, talking with the middle school, high school administration and guidance, a big problem is our scheduling. I've reached out to Rob Millay, and we are working to resolve these scheduling issues. He is planning a meeting soon that we will be invited to start talking about these because we're concerned that our numbers are low.
Winston, I think you know the most about this agreement. Is there anything that's changed that we should be advised about?
Yeah, they made a few changes, but nothing that's going to affect us that I can see. What they have, one of the big changes is they're now going to have two directors, one for Fall Mountain and one for Cheshire Career Center. And that is the only change. Jeremy was there when they discussed it at the meetings. And also the Fall Mountain is going to be a receiving district now, just like Keene is.
In which areas of study?
And they will be also be able to provide programs to their students out there, like agriculture, without having to come down to Cheshire to do it.
Okay. So
That's the
Fall
way I
Mountain's gonna
understand
take
it, Jeremy, is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah, there was a big discussion about that director title. Last I heard, Lori Landry, the superintendent, was going to be the director. It's a title. It doesn't have to be a separate paid position. It's the person that's going to be responsible. The way that the gentleman from the state explained it, it's the person that's responsible for the equipment and the things that are purchased by that. They basically have to sign for it and take responsibility of it. So you have to have someone who's assigned to that duty to be responsible for the stuff that's owned by the Career Center.
Is there anything that we wanted to have changed in here that didn't go through?
No, the conversations were really easy. They weren't difficult. Like I said, the stuff that we're concerned about isn't in the agreement. It's how the agreement happens and how we can get our enrollment up.
Okay. This was a long time coming. Can you help us understand what the delay was in bringing on the new version of the contract?
Sure, and Wynn, jump in if you want, but from what I understand, the state got very involved in it. That's how it was explained to us. It went back to the state. The Commissioner of Education needed to sign off on it, and lawyers at the state level are going through all of the regional agreements, so it took a long time to get it back and forth from the state. And then it got stalled in the process. Someone dropped the ball in the process, and it never made it back to us. And then I'll be honest, Lisa and I started pushing and saying, hey, where is this? And it got the ball rolling again. So the talks took longer mostly because of coordination, of getting everyone to do their piece. And like I said, it ended up at the state level for a while.
Any other questions about the agreement? Scott?
Should we have any concern that it's a 20-year agreement?
I'm gonna let Wynn.
The 20-year agreement, but every 3 years we have to review it. There's another paragraph in there that states that it must be reviewed every 3 years with all the parties. And that has been done on a sort of a regular basis, but not, like Jeremy mentioned. I don't think we've had a signed contract since 2013. And over the years, things have been progressing, and then the state has approved this one, if I read this correctly.
Yes.
It came back approved. And, but the other ones were originally was 20 years also.
Can I say something? I'm reading that 20-year paragraph. Way I read it, tell me if I'm wrong.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 8 of 12, number 33.
Okay.
It does, 20 years sounds like an eternity, right? But it does, the way I'm reading it, it does allow us the ability to terminate the contract should we have an issue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So for example, our enrollment goes beyond the point of no return and we decide to do something different, we would have that ability.
You have the ability to discuss it with them.
The discussing it's one thing.
I know,
We have the
but it's
ability to
different.
terminate
Yeah.
the contract.
I think it would have to be looked at through the director. If you want to do some changes there.
Essentially, it would end up at the Department of Education, and they have the final say as to the agreement.
The copy of the agreement that we have hasn't been executed by everyone yet, but do we know whether Fall Mountain Keene School Board and the Commissioner of Education have all agreed to sign this yet?
Yes, it is all set at the state level, and I believe it's all set at Keene, and I don't know on Fall Mountain, actually.
Okay. Scott?
I'm skimming back looking for the paragraph that describes how the cost formula shall be mutually agreeable between the districts, but it
Page.
doesn't say what the formula would be, so do we know that already as to how we calculate what we pay?
The last page, Appendix A, gives a little more information on the enrollments and things.
Hold on, I'll find it.
That's page 13.
Yeah. Got it, and I lost it.
So is it number 28 under other items? Appendix A. Page 13.
All right, it's not a searchable PDF.
I think it's number 28 under other items.
Yes, thank you. Thought it was earlier, but, so then Appendix A is hiding on,
Page 13.
So maybe this would be more appropriate for a future meeting, but to understand under this formula design what our cost is, given the number of students we're sending.
Okay. And would you want that to have a bearing on whether we vote in favor of this contract?
No, because I don't think we're gonna just, look at the formula and the cost and suddenly decide to take students out of the program or anything like that. But I think from a 3-year perspective in our long-term planning, we should understand, ratio of students, what we're spending for that, and, how we factor that in the future.
Okay, I have that down for a future meeting. Any other questions or comments about the agreement, Betty?
Just a question. It appears that Fall Mountain's status within the group has changed. Have they developed courses that they didn't have before that they're now offering? And are there any courses, I know every now and then we say, well, we should be doing this here instead of whatever. Are we missing an opportunity by not also developing some courses that we could offer to the other two groups, the other two districts?
I think, this is my opinion, Fall Mountain has always been sort of renowned for their farming and agriculture because of their spaces, and, they have the good facilities for it.
And are those the courses that they're offering that aren't offered at this career center?
Yes, and if we had a niche or something that we were really, really good at and we could offer it to the other two districts,
Okay,
I would think that we should.
okay.
That's just my opinion, but I don't think we're there right now. Is that?
That was the exact discussion. Fall Mountain had, they made the case to the whole group that they had a reason to do this. They also tried to add a couple other classes that the group, the advisory committee didn't necessarily agree with, so they weren't able to offer those ones. But for their agriculture and their agriculture and horticulture, I think is the two, if I remember right. At the time of this agreement, we didn't have something to put on the table.
Okay.
But I asked the question in the meeting, at any time, do we have to wait 3 years to put something on the table, or at any time can we come back if we have something? And we were assured by the state and by the other members of the group that we absolutely could.
And what
Go ahead.
does that look like? Who decides where ideas come from?
So the ideas come.
Student-oriented? Is it workforce-oriented? Is it in partnership with,
So I mean, it's a CT. It has to be a CTE program, career technical education program
Right.
that isn't offered at one of the other receiving locations. We can't compete with CCC. So if CCC is offering a specific program, we can't offer that same program unless we can justify why we're offering it or how it's different or how our take is a little bit different. You don't offer the same programs throughout the region.
Is there a process, if there was an interest to do something that we don't do now, is there a process in place for how to recommend that for study?
No.
Bring it to your desk
Bring it to my desk. There's not an official process. It would have to be, if the teachers who do the CTE type classes had that, they would bring it and we would start studying it. We would develop a course and bring it to the advisory board. And I can, Wynn's been through this process more than I have, so definitely he could do it.
If you look at number 4, where it says receiving district shall maintain an active career and technical education advisory committee, in which Neil has been appointed to that, to represent us on that advisory committee. And that also is the way to go about to making sure you get this. And one of the others down there said they have to provide guidance and materials for the students as well while they're there at the school taking courses. The receiving school does.
Thank you.
Anything else on the agreement? We ready for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Very good.
Lisa,
Yes.
I don't know if it matters, but I would authorize a motion to authorize you to sign for the school district on the page that's in the back.
Is
I
there,
assume it would happen automatically.
I'll second that.
it would, having just agreed that we would pass the agreement, but yes. So any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thanks for the clarification, Lynn.
And just come in and do that so you can have it notarized.
Yep. Policies ACE, GCQ, KBIJ.
Okay, so thank you to Lillian for including in the packet not only the policies, but for a second time, the rationale document. At our last meeting, we did something a little different. We used the first read to actually read through the rationale. So starting with policy ACE, the motion already on the floor is to adopt the NHSBA sample policy as written. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion?
Yeah, can we just say for the people listening in what the policies are?
Can you go ahead and do that on each one?
Sure.
Thank you.
Do ACE?
Okay.
Okay, ACE, procedural safeguards, non-discrimination on the basis of handicap or disability.
Yep, so this policy update has to do with how the New Hampshire Department of Education has developed a handbook that we're obligated to follow, and it no longer makes sense to itemize all the particulars in a policy, but instead to simply refer to the handbook.
Any other discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Okay. Policy GCQ, the non-renewal, termination, and dismissal of certified staff. The motion already on the floor is to adopt the NHSBA sample policy as written. Is there a second?
Second.
So this is a missing policy for this district, and non-renewing of certified staff has always been at the recommendation of the administration, but has not been supported by any official policy on our book. So this is, result of the audit that we paid for. We're identifying policies that are missing, and so we want to add this one to our portfolio.
So we're not changing anything in practice?
Correct.
Any other questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Okay, policy KB, this is a Title I Family and Community Engagement Policy. There were changes to the sample policy based on the Every Student Succeeds Act. Our old policy is fairly outdated, so this motion is to adopt the New Hampshire School Board Association sample policy as written. Is there a second?
Second. We'll take it from Kristen this time.
Just to share the wealth. Okay. Last time we updated this policy was 1993. So again, this is about us getting updated and current.
All right, any discussion here? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Okay, last one for the evening is policy IJ, Instructional Resources and Instructional Resource Plan. This one's a little bit more detailed. So we have taken the New Hampshire School Board Association's policy and as a policy committee made modifications. So the motion on the floor is to adopt the proposed policy as presented and to retire the previous policy IJ. Is there a second?
Second.
Can you explain to us again why we are getting rid of IJ, just for clarification?
So we're not getting rid of IJ, we're retiring the former IJ, which was a far simpler policy. Again, last updated a long time ago. The modifications that the policy committee is recommending is to make this an annual review to the school board so that we have a written, multi-year, 7-year, rolling education and curriculum plan, and that as the board refreshes every spring, that each new board would have an opportunity to see that written plan and that that plan would be refreshed annually. We did not discuss or recommend the timing within the year that the policy would be updated. So I look at Jeremy when I say that and suggest that, education committee and administration, sort of make a battle plan once hopefully this is approved. And just maybe bring back to next meeting, a rough timeframe.
Very good. Any others? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Good. Next item on the agenda is phone system. I think it's safe to skip over that one for this evening. The person who was sort of driving that request isn't present with us. Funding formula. We do need to decide as a board how we're going to move forward and deal with this issue. Someone needs to make a suggestion about how we're going to move forward, if at all.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
In looking at all the funding workshops and meetings that are going out there right now, not in regards to this district, but in regards to the state, right? There's been a lot of meetings in Cheshire County. We are aware of some lawsuits and things like that. Is it appropriate, I know it's not comfortable, it's not welcome, it's not the best solution, but is it appropriate to wait until resolution or to see if there's any other developments with that before tackling such a momentous, paradigm-shifting topic? And I'm not against doing it, but I'm just wondering if we're putting the cart before the horse.
So if we look at what may happen legislatively through the funding fairness campaign that is statewide, it'll certainly take years. If we want anything over the next couple of years to shift the formula. If we don't do it here in this group to find something that's more fair than 50-50, I can almost guarantee that 50-50 is going on the ballot as a petitioned warrant article. So that's what we need to consider. We're either going to stick with what we have and think it's okay and hope that it stands up to 50-50 on the ballot, or we can try to come up with something in between and get everyone behind it. Nick?
I think it could just as easily go with, depending on who petitions the warrant article, it can be any number of ratios. So I think it's, well, you shake your head, why?
Because by law, it can only be 0, 100, 100, 0, or 50-50. Those are the only three numbers that can be petitioned.
So it could easily be any one of those.
It could be any one of the three,
right.
yeah.
So I'm hesitant to delve into this because I think as you saw with the numerous committees that have been discussing this over the years, there's polarized opinion. And I think you're going to have that same polarized opinion here at the board level. And I think this is something that over the years, the board has taken the position of allowing the public to put forward those motions at the deliberative session. So I would like to continue down that path unless some new available solutions come about through legislation or at the state level.
Okay, and that is next on our agenda. We'll be discussing that. Does anyone have any more input on how this group moves forward on the funding formula for our district? Scott?
I don't know that let me restart. We haven't invested the time that the Fair Funding Group has invested. We've received the materials, thank you very much, but we ourselves have not spent the hours looking at the screen, talking through it, right, as a group. Is there a referral to Finance Committee? Is there a subcommittee we form? Is there a special workshop we create with full board where we go through it instead of just dodging it?
We'd have to make a motion for that to happen. So is there a particular motion that you want to make?
I would move to create a dedicated evening or weekend workshop for the full board
Second.
to go through the materials and invite the Fair Funding Group to walk us, those who are left, if they'd be willing to walk us through at a deeper level.
Okay. That was the second by Betty. Who here would like to discuss that? Brian?
So just so I'm clear then, if we move this motion forward, then all we're committing to at this point is just gathering information. We're not
Educational
committing
workshop.
to making one more step past that?
All right.
But the whole board would be involved, not just a subcommittee.
How soon would you want to see this happen?
I would say we'd want to get it done by Thanksgiving, if we could, so that we then have time to deliberate and work through a warrant article motion if we're going to make one.
Okay. Any other questions? Kristen?
Not really questions, but comments. I think this is a good idea, especially just looking at that information that we received that was in the selectmen's report. I looked through it, but I feel like I would need someone to kind of talk us through a little bit more. Just looking at all the numbers kind of made you need a little more information. So I think if the full board did this, it would be good instead of a committee. I agree with Scott.
Here's my only concern, is that if we do wait too long to get together as a full group, we're going to find ourselves in a meeting room asking, can we have a cap? Is that even legal?
That's true.
And there's not going to be time to figure that out with the lawyer. So we can move forward with this motion and decide to have a meeting, but I would strongly suggest to have a second motion this evening to ask legal counsel about whether that cap is even legal.
I'll move.
Okay, so we'll do that next. First, we'll vote on this first, if we're all in agreement to have a meeting. Nick?
I'm happy for people to meet and talk about it. There's been a lot of talk about it, especially in qualitative terms. I know that as soon as this funding formula group got into actual numbers, that's where you saw the polarization occur. We saw it very early on where everybody was together, and then towards the end when they started talking about hard numbers, it went like this and the group dissolved. Like you said, I fully agree with you. Unless there are some other, we can implement things like caps for certain towns or things like that, we really only have a few options, and those few options are very easy to discuss here in about 10 minutes. I think people are going to have their opinion on what their view of what option they would select there. So I'm not going to invest an entire amount of my time into this discussion group unless those different options present themselves and we can really have more things to discuss.
Any other questions on motion number 1, which is to have the meeting? Scott?
Just for clarity, because it would be all of us, we will need to post it, but I would suggest that we articulate it in a way that if not everybody comes and we don't make a quorum, we're still having the workshop. It's an educational session. Those who attend.
All right. Can we make sure we capture that in the minutes, Laura? Okay. So all in favor of having a workshop?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
One abstention.
All right, so we've got Robin
two.
Nick abstaining. And now Kristen,
I'd move to inquire with legal counsel if caps and, is it just the caps that we need
it's
to?
just the cap at this time. Oh, pooling of
And
adequacy.
pooling of adequacy is a viable option.
Second.
All right, I think I heard the second come from Karen. And Betty, did you have a question first?
I can wait till after, it's just a question.
Kristen?
Does it need to have since there's a money amount to inquiring with legal counsel, do I have to? Okay, no.
No. We have no idea how many hours it's going to take legal counsel. We couldn't begin to guess. Anyone else have questions about this? All in favor of inquiring with legal counsel on whether the options are viable?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Good, so we'll do that. That's on my to-do list.
Can we ensure that whatever response that we get from legal counsel is distributed to the whole board?
Of course, I'm going to put it on next meeting's agenda, give you an update on where we stand on that, but I don't expect that we're going to have an answer by then.
Thank you.
It'll just sound more like we asked. Betty?
And I just have a question. It's my understanding that it's either 100% or 50/50. If it's anything else, the school board has to endorse it.
That's correct.
Okay.
It needs to come from this body or another body recommending it to us and us supporting it.
Correct, okay.
Yeah. All right. So now the broader aspect of education funding. There was an excellent workshop on education funding just a couple of weeks ago. Several of us attended. Kristen was there, Lisa was there. And out of that, we received a template letter from Conval School Board. They've already written to let's see. It's to the select board members, superintendents, and school board chairpersons. Really, it's just a broad letter talking about funding fairness and the funding fairness campaign. And the reason you're looking at this letter now is because we'd like to inquire as to whether this board would like to doctor this a little bit. Thank you. And put out our own letter supporting some sort of a change in school funding in the state of New Hampshire. This would be us jumping on board with a funding fairness campaign. So, Jeremy or others, can you tell me, did the template come out in the school board packet, or was it just the letter from Conval without the blanks?
Just the letter.
Okay. So if all you saw was the letter from Conval, it would look sort of similar, but we'd want to put our own flavor into it, and if we don't agree with a particular thing, or we feel that a particular number isn't quite accurate, we would fix that. Maybe the best way to move forward, if we feel it is appropriate, to write a letter of our own and throw our hat into the ring. Is that how you say it? Yeah? Yeah? Okay.
Name in the hat in the ring.
Right, okay. So if we wanted to get involved, my suggestion would be to have Lisa mark this up with what she thinks the Monadnock School Board's position would be, and then bring it back to us so we can vote on whether we want it to go out. Yeah? If someone agrees with that, could you make a motion to that effect?
I'd like to make a motion to have our board develop some version of this letter on public funding fairness campaign. And then, join join what the Conval School District has started.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay. And to clarify the intent of that motion, would you want Lisa Witt and Lisa Stedman, to work on that and bring it back to the board?
I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
And yeah. I believe this letter actually went out to all of the representatives that represent, the House and the Senate and all of that. And this cover letter is just telling the select board members and superintendents that they should also send out the letter. So this would be going to our state representatives.
Yeah, okay. Scott and then Nick.
I was just noodling through why Lisa and not CRC.
Why would we send it to Lisa Witt instead of CRC?
Expediency.
The reason I suggested Lisa is because she's very involved legislatively, and she knows what our position is, and she knows where the numbers really come from without having to do the homework that the CRC would have to do. That's why I suggested it, but
That's fine
it
reason.
could go either way.
Yeah.
Well, the board needs to let her know what our position is.
Yeah, of course. But by asking her by telling her that we want to join the funding fairness campaign, we're saying, this is our position, can you help make it clear? Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that from my reading through this target, correct me if I'm wrong, targets essentially getting more funding from the state, not necessarily how funding is gathered through the district. So it's
Right, this
bringing
isn't
down the
district,
total
it's the
amount.
state.
Yep.
Yeah. So it matters more, I mean, it deals more with how we're collecting the funds that are supporting all of the schools in the state of New Hampshire. And right now, that's through property taxes.
Right, it doesn't get in too much detail about where those funds would come from. It's just saying that we need to open up the door to allow state funding.
Right, it doesn't
State
explicitly
funding.
say that
Yep.
we want a broad-based tax, like a sales tax or an income tax or anything like that, but just that the system's broken, let's do something about it.
And I have a question. Should
Yeah,
I
Betty?
add to that motion a time, a deadline, or anything like that for when the letter should be ready? Is there a deadline associated with this?
At this point, I'm reluctant to ask her to have it ready for the next meeting, but I expect it maybe by 2 meetings from now.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll work together. We'll see if we can get it ready for the next
Yep.
board meeting, still here in the month of October.
Were you able to add that in, Laura?
All right. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of joining the Funding Fairness Campaign?
I,
Opposed? Abstentions?
Point of, is that what we're doing here? We're forwarding the letter, or are we joining this campaign?
So Betty's recommendation was to join the Funding Fairness Campaign. Step 1 in that is to have Lisa look at this letter and revise it and make it ours.
Okay, because those are like two different things. Just doing the letter, or actually the board supporting this statewide campaign.
We are voting to support the campaign.
Okay.
That was my intent, was that it was for the campaign, and the letter would signify that.
We actually just voted to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. But they did say point of order, so we were a little bit on hold. But I think the motion passed, and I was asking then, is there anyone opposed? Are there any abstentions?
I guess I'll abstain.
Okay, and Winston is abstaining as well. Very good. I think that's a good move. That's a smart thing. The Board and Budget Committee joint meeting date. We had proposed the date in our most recent board meeting. I have it written down here. Can you tell me, Brian, if the Budget Committee was buying in on the day that we,
I was not in attendance.
Janelle?
anyone who was in attendance, Janelle?
I was in attendance, and they are on board with meeting on November 17th, which is
17th.
what you proposed.
Okay. So, would someone make a motion to set the Board Budget Committee joint meeting date for November 17th, please?
I make a motion to set the joint budget and board meeting for Saturday, November 17th, from 8 to 12.
Second.
All right, and the second came from Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Question on that?
Yes.
Is there any risk to the fact that it's 2 weeks later than it has been in the past couple of years? Does that affect our timeline at all, or any?
No.
Okay.
No, we're in compliance.
We've just done it
and-
around Halloween the past few years. I just
Right.
wasn't sure.
Yeah, so last year, it was on the 4th of November. Yeah, and that's just more tradition than it is a compliance matter. All right, Finance Committee has some budget transfers for us. Do we have anyone here representing Finance Committee this evening? All right.
I'm on,
Yeah, do you have the motions that Karen wanted to make for this evening?
I don't with me. Janelle made out some paperwork for the committee
You online?
transfers, and she'd have to, I don't have any paperwork on it here.
All right.
I didn't know that Karen wasn't going to be here. I didn't bring those numbers myself because she typically presents those.
I recommend we
Were
wait
you
till,
copied on that email?
how
Steve?
urgent is this, Janelle?
The Finance Committee motions? If you could
Can't
look
be
it
too
up.
urgent if she doesn't have the numbers.
It's not in the packet, then no.
And we also have quotes for building appraisals.
Oh, Laura has the numbers.
No. We don't.
We don't have quotes for building appraisals.
I'll defer then to Janelle unless she got them from our last facilities meeting.
I think I can speak to that. There was one quote that came in for the building appraisals, and it was from the one supplier that exists in this region, and I asked several realtors if there was anyone else, and they said, no, there's not anyone else.
And I've asked a couple as well and had the same response.
If I could get
okay,
into my
then that's
email, we could
different.
get through this piece, because I do have the information, but,
I do not. Oh,
all right. Scott, if you could take a second to try to look that up.
Yep, I
Or if
will.
somebody wants to plug the network key into my computer.
I think I know.
We need to move on, though, and we'll go to board chair report while we're trying to get that piece. We'd like to propose that we do a roles and responsibilities training with the New Hampshire School Boards Association. And there are a couple of reasons for that. I think it's just healthy for us all to sort of know our roles and responsibilities as board members. And there is a little bit of confusion anytime there are new board members that come on. Where do I draw the line? What can I do? What can't I do? We put a copy, this is just as a for instance, we put a copy of policy BDD, which is board and superintendent relations, into the packet. One of the stipulations of this board superintendent's relations policy says that as a board, we function as a board rather than as individuals. And it's the superintendent's responsibility to deal with the board as a whole rather than with individual members. So not everyone sees this, but you guys are really good about copying me on emails when folks send emails to Lisa. And I see emails coming from different board members toward her all of the time. And there's really no one who can guard her time because except us. We're the board, we're her only boss. We're the only bosses that exist. So there's no one to say, Lisa, spend your time on this, not that, except that there is a policy that says that we as board members need to function as a board when we're asking questions and not just coming at her individually. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in that the board responsibilities meeting. I think it'll help clarify a lot of things for us. Also, it's tough as board members sometimes to be wearing different hats. I just had this conversation with Kristen. Like, it's tough when you're a parent and something's wrong with the menu and you know the person in charge of the menu, but do you go straight there? No, because, I mean, you have a shortcut, you know how to take care of it quickly, but you're still a parent, so you have to go through the channels. You know, you're also a coach for the district sometimes. You wear so many different hats, and where do you draw the line? What's appropriate of a board member, what's not? I think this training will help us to work through that too. So I'd love to have the board's support in just getting together and having this time of training so we can clarify some of those. Rob?
With that training, and this is not a knock against you two, but it's always been a question of mine since I joined the board, would that also define roles and responsibilities of board officers? I've never known, to be honest, other than running the meeting, right? What's the difference? You know, because you set the agenda, or whoever sits in your chair, right? Sets the agenda with Lisa and, you know, and there's a lot of communication that goes on there that I'm sure is all fine. But what is the responsibility of everybody?
We can absolutely ask for that. And the summary of the training is in this packet that we handed out earlier. Is there anyone who didn't get a summary of the training? All right. And if it doesn't cover what's the chair's responsibility, how does the chair of the board interact with the superintendent, and how is that different from the other board members or the board interacting as a whole with the superintendent? And absolutely, we can ask for them to cover that in the session. I know another person who's very, very good at speaking to public versus private lives and how to draw the lines, how to get through the lines that are so blurry sometimes between parent and board member, wearing different hats. So, you know, maybe we can just like put these things together in just a time of learning and maybe a good meal. Nick, did you have a concern or a question?
Yeah, that's why I had my hand raised.
Go ahead.
I think this training is available to all board members at, it's a couple times a year that they hold the sessions in, is it Concord or Manchester, or wherever it is that they hold them. And I think the board has funds set aside for board members to participate in that, and if they'd like to. I've certainly read through all those documents over the past few years, just so I could have an understanding of what the NHSBA's position is on all the issues that surround being a board member. I agree with the vast majority of them. There's a few things in this document that I actually disagree with. But I have no personal problem with anybody going to receive official training in Concord or Manchester if they'd like to.
We're talking about bringing it here, and that's what the School Boards Association has offered to do. It's one of the services that's available to us as a board. It's part of what we pay for. I'm seeing Kristen first, and then I think it was Betty, and then Brian. I'm sorry if I'm out of order.
I went to the new board recruit training. This is a lot more comprehensive. I didn't actually feel like I walked away with that much more information when I went to that, to be honest. And this sounds like a lot more information that I would have wanted to learn when I went to Concord. So I think this would be great if it came here.
Betty?
I think there's value in us taking that training as a group, rather than just whoever happens to be in the room on that day, as long as enough of us commit to going.
Brian?
I was going to say the exact same thing Betty did.
And if I could just interject
Yeah, go.
for 1 second. Do you feel like there's value of you expressing your opposing opinions while we're all together? Because that would be a really good forum for you to explain why you don't agree with certain things and for us to work through it as a group.
Most of them are just nitty-gritty things where I don't think it captures some of the RSAs properly. So,
Maybe we need to hear that.
yeah.
Yeah, and that would be a good place for it. Am I right?
No.
Yeah.
You could if you wanted to, I guess.
Rob?
Just two questions. These are correct my misunderstanding, my ignorance. These are suggestions, right? These aren't laws.
Right. This is just
This
School
is
Board
like a-
Association.
Right.
Blueprint for how to run a board,
Well-
right? Is that correct? I
Yeah,
mean,
a
it does
lot-
incorporate some RSAs and some things.
I'll let the policy chair speak to that because I think,
Yeah, so I noticed in the packet that they're referencing a lot of sample policies where we may have adjusted the policy for our,
Best practices.
right? But a lot of those policies do reference RSA specifics.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's a policy about agenda setting. There's a policy about board member authority and what we can or can't do, right? It's a great topic for us to get into. That definitely ties to some specific RSAs. So I think we'd get, rather than any one of us interpreting that, we'd get a professional who's been through this with other boards guiding us through. But in that moment, as a family, we'd be able to talk about, well, but we do it this way, and they'd be able to clear the air force, like, well, yeah, that's a bad habit, or no, you're spot on. So,
And then the second question I would have is, how many of us are up for reelection? And is it better served to wait until this is reset?
that would put us into March. We're a long way from March right now.
would we have the opportunity to record it for the sake of new board members coming on in future years?
I would think so. I would think so.
It's a service that we're paying for, so I don't know
Yeah.
if they'd have a concern, but.
But I'll ask. Nick?
I'd actually be in greater favor of speaking to council for an afternoon and discussing the RSAs themselves rather than another institution's interpretation of the RSAs. Just go right to the source of what the roles and responsibilities of a board are.
Could have our council there.
Well, yeah, well, then you're getting,
That would
even
cost them
muddying it
money.
even more.
Kill two birds.
Would they be sending a
but this-
trainer or one of their certified lawyers?
My thought is this would probably be Will, the lawyer for the New Hampshire School Boards Association. So it wouldn't be our own lawyer. It would be theirs. would it make sense for us to do this on the 17th, the same day that we're getting together for the board budget meeting? Or is that too much for a Saturday? Might be tough to get someone there on a Saturday to begin with, but.
Yeah, there's more than an hour's worth of material here, plus food. We probably should do it a different day or time.
Yeah.
Plus, we've just approved another workshop on the fair funding, so while all of this is important, we should not, well, we should think about all of it.
All right,
time-wise.
so step one is, do we want to do this? Step two is maybe a doodle poll on when we can make it happen, okay? Can I have a doodle poll? I know, we'll talk about it offline.
Off camera.
Sorry.
All right. I think before I move forward, I'd like to have a motion and a second so we can sort of formally agree as a board that we want to do this. May I have a motion, please?
I'll move to invite the New Hampshire School Board Association to deliver a tailored workshop to our board
Okay.
on board member
Second.
training.
Now, is that invite or pay for?
Oh,
We already pay for membership, and training is part of our membership dues. I'm not 100% clear that this is going to be free for us, but it is something that they offer to their members.
Because I'd like to have an idea of what we're going to spend on this.
I'll come back to you and let you know if there's going to be a fee when we begin setting the date. All right, the second came from Brian. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
For abstention.
Saw that one coming. All right, so there's one abstention from Nick. And when I come back to you with any cost that might be associated, I mean, certainly the meal, if we're going to do a meal together, and a date, we will also talk about who the trainer is going to be.
8.71, 0.2.
We'll work out the details.
Is that what you were looking for?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Before I continue on with the board chair report, let's go back to finance for a second, because Scott has just pulled up the one quote that we have for assessment, appraisal for the this pool buildings. And each of the buildings is $2,800 with a 10% discount. That comes to $15,120 for appraisals of all of our buildings done by professional real estate appraisal company. Is there anyone who wants to move that? I'm sorry, the vendor is Powers Smith and Associates. Rob, do you want to move that?
I'd like to move it with some discussion, if that's possible.
Of course. Do we have a second? Second. Discussion.
This is part, I guess I can report to some extent for the Facilities Committee that this is part of a larger discussion that the Facilities Committee is going to be taking up in terms of what we're doing. The project that we're doing is massive in terms of the study, in terms of the resources needed to come forward with wherever we land, right? And so we are going to be spending some time at our next meeting Tuesday. When is that right? Tuesday? Talking about other possibilities that we might need from a budget standpoint to complete the work that the committee's been tasked with. But it is also part of a discussion. I know we did not go with using a consultant, but I think we'll have a much better idea of the total dollars we're asking for to complete the type of work that we've been tasked with at the, we'll need to complete it by the next board meeting.
The list of buildings included all of the buildings, but it didn't include Wilcox. I heard there was one extra email saying, would Wilcox also be an additional $2,800? And
The answer was yes.
Okay, so should we be adding that $2,800 to the $15,000?
Every building is 2,800.
All right, so we need to make sure that we're voting
Excluding-
on the actual total.
Right, and we're excluding the high school. The high school is not being appraised.
All right,
Our next facilities meeting is the 23rd of October.
That'll be the meeting that we come up with the rest of the money. I
And
don't have,
Dave is here if you have any questions about that form and at the appraisals. Or was here.
he left. Nick?
here he comes.
So my question related to this is, I fully understand done the structural assessments for some of the schools, so we can have an idea of what needs to be fixed up. I understood the questions regarding Troy, because there were a lot of questions surrounding the integrity of that school, and whether or not the soil was okay for building if we ever went down that path. What is the information, what are you looking to get from having property
Great
values
question.
for the
Great question.
schools?
We're looking at the whole inventory. There are options being discussed, from additions on schools to doing nothing, right? To building new schools, to closing school, everything is being discussed. There has been no path no rock unturned in terms of possibilities that we'll research. So in order to do that, the committee was interested in finding out what buildings are worth, not saying we're doing it, okay? We're recommending it. Should we ever be in a position where we would be looking to sell said building, what's it worth? What's a common value that we might get for it to help defray any construction that we may or may not take?
And Rob, the only building we were leaving out was this building.
Was the high school. Yep.
All right, so that leaves us with Troy, Emerson, Cutler, Mount Caesar, the SAU building, right, the White House?
Yep. Not included. Mount Caesar, Cutler, Troy, Emerson, Gilsum, and Wilcox are the only buildings.
So it
There
was
a
the
follow-
SAU
The
building
follow-up email was the
was to be
SAU.
added.
Yeah.
So it's 2,800
So that's
times, times 7, less 10%.
Sounds a little strange that assessing the SAU building and assessing Mount Caesar are both $2,800.
It's a commercial building. Are you doing the math?
Yeah.
Jeremy came up with 17,640.
I think we need to amend the motion for 17,640 in that case.
If we add on the Husky Snack Hut, is that another $2,800?
We're not doing this building.
Yeah.
Or its other structures. So one would think that any time that you have a building, a commercial real estate appraisal, it would include that building and anything else on the deed for that particular building.
I was being sarcastic with the last one.
So the original motion maker was you, Rob?
Yes. I would take the
17,640.
friendly amendment to adjust the amount.
All right, so I'm not,
Who was the second?
I think Betty was the second. Laura, if I think that you can reflect that I made the suggestion for the friendly amendment. I usually don't, but
You can say that I did. That vote too.
Scott?
So while we're discussing this, we've started to dig into, no pun intended, soil sampling and load bearing, and now here's appraisals. And we're starting to spend money on the good research we need to do, but we did not budget for any of this. And at some point, we drift towards, well, what would it cost to do an addition, or what would it cost to build a new building, and et cetera, and we need to do that work that's coming next, right? I was sort of anticipating that we'd get into a warrant article coming up for the next season at the polls that deals with.
This coming year?
Yeah.
No.
At some point, raising funds for the sake of architectural planning and research and what have you, because this is now, here's a $17,000 number that we didn't plan on. How many of these kinds of research tasks can we take on before we're?
And as I said when I started, that's our next, we came to the conclusion, Betty, jump in if I'm missing something. We came to the conclusion at the end of our facilities meeting that we really need to kind of put everything on the board, possibilities-wise, that we're evaluating, along with things that have a cost value to, a cost to them, to report back to the board what it's going to cost to fulfill this project.
Yeah.
Regardless of, regardless, the appraisal of the buildings is something we're going to need no matter what.
Nick.
I share the same concern. I'd like to see, this information as well, but I also want to know of what this is impacting in the overall budget right now, since, as was mentioned, we haven't budgeted for it. So do we have the resources to do these studies, or are we going to be sacrificing in other areas to do them? So I just want to make sure, coming from Janelle, that we have $18,000 that we can utilize for the study, and that it isn't going to come at the expense of cutting something else.
Janelle, can you tell me where this money, this $17,000 would come from?
I wouldn't be able to tell you tonight, but I'd be happy to look at that and come back with a proposal.
Does anyone here feel that we need to postpone the vote on this?
I feel that I would like to postpone it just one meeting, but I would also like to have an understanding of what sort of resources in the budget would be available moving forward in order to tackle a lot of these studies that may be coming up.
Can you say the magic word, table?
I would like to table until next board meeting, until that information is available.
All right. Is there a second to the motion to table?
Second.
All right, so take Kristen. So we're discussing the motion to table at this time. Betty, did you have a question or comment on that?
No, that's all right, go ahead.
Okay.
I would also like a list of, because those things you're saying do cost quite a bit of money, just see if we should build new or get an addition or anything like that. So if we do an appraisal now, how long is it going to take to get those funds to do those other things? And is the appraisal going to be out of date by the time we can move forward? So.
You can see the complexity of the whole situation,
Yes.
right? And that's why originally my proposal was to hire a consultant to conduct this work in a very efficient, effective, and timely fashion. That was not the will of the board,
The committee,
of the board. That went to the.
was it?
Mm-hmm, yeah. All right.
Betty had her hand up.
Betty, just on the motion to table.
All right, then wait, I'll wait.
Okay. We need to vote on the motion to table. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That was just Rob abstaining.
I was gonna say, I think we can bring something back that's a little more comprehensive, where we meet on Tuesday.
The 23rd of October.
The 9th.
No, we also, it's at the end of the agenda here where it lists all the meetings, we also meet on the 9th.
When you gave me false
We're
information.
meeting twice a month right now.
Hey, can't trust Smokey the Bear anymore.
Yeah, 6:30 on the 9th, and so I think we can put together a little bit more comprehensive package to bring to the board for the next meeting.
Okay. And I'm just looking back at the budget transfer requests that we thought were forthcoming.
I have it.
Okay, thank you.
So there were two budget transfers that the Finance Committee voted to move forward to the board. One was for $10,095. It's moving money from curriculum in world language and math to social studies, which was discussed in the budget process, but they just weren't moved to the appropriate lines. And the other similar
Oh,
sorry. Do you want to do them separately?
We do want to vote on them separately, but then you said similar, so is it similar enough that we should know both of them first?
It's not curriculum, but it's similar in that you discussed it in the budget process. So do you want me to go forward?
Let's vote on this one first.
There you
To
go.
move money from $10,000 from world language to social studies.
World language and math to social studies.
Who wants to make that motion? Nick?
Is it recommended by administration?
Yes, I brought it forward.
So moved.
Second.
Betty was the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, now the second one. Sorry about that, Janelle.
No worries. The second one has to do with the reading specialist. We had a .5 in Troy and a .5 in Emerson. And in the budget process, it was to make a district-wide position. But again,
The reading
Oh,
to
okay.
library media specialist.
to library and media. Sorry about that. And that total is $62,356 for salary and benefits.
Would anyone like to make that motion?
I so move.
Winston, the second? Second. Betty? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And do we know from Finance Committee if anything came up about the funding for additional paraprofessionals that we discussed at the last meeting?
We didn't discuss that at finance.
Okay. I think that, all right, that gets us through Finance Committee. I'll continue on with Board Chair report. Name tags have come out. We had an interesting sort of thing happen with Kristen. She went to get her photograph taken for School Pictures Day, and they gave her an official name tag to, can you actually get into the school? Like, is it live?
I think it's,
But anyway, it's like, it's an official MRSD name badge. And if for anyone who gets their picture taken, I think that you may be privy to one of these name badges as well if you'd like. It's kind of fun.
I
So,
see
yeah.
Jeremy squirming in his chair over there.
Just
It won't,
too much coffee.
won't get you into any of the buildings, can't promise that, but, you know, you'll have your picture and it might just, make sure you wear it in the right spot.
Yep.
Left breast.
Should have brought it.
So, school safety, no, I'm sorry, there's one more thing. There's not, I'm sorry. Moving on to school safety update, and this is part of the superintendent's report.
Yep. So I'm going to take the superintendent's report tonight. For Lisa, for those who don't know, her family is experiencing a medical emergency with her father, and she has to be with him right now. It's very serious. So she asked Janelle and I to take care of her report tonight. And I'm going to skip to, if you look at school safety, we have school safety meetings and then armed security personnel. And I want to start there because Chief DeAngelis is here. I want to get him up to talk before that gets too much later because he's been waiting. I'd like to also just read what Lisa wrote in her notes for me to share with everyone so you understand where she's at. So I'm going to read it. I met with Chief DeAngelis a couple of times, most recently last week, and asked him to come be part of this conversation. He has presented to me a good argument for having Frank DeTorres, or our school personnel, be armed. Only concerns are, one, drafting policy to allow for this, while at the same time making sure it doesn't open the door any wider than allowing someone with exact qualifications like Frank to be armed. In other words, drafting a policy that essentially defines what Frank does without using Frank's name. I hope that makes sense. Primex, will they allow it? The chief indicated that the department would take care of his training and certifications. She talked a little bit about should this conversation wait till she's here, but she is not willing to let this wait because she knows it's important. So she said she'll leave it in your capable hands. I will also offer to call in at this point of the meeting if that will help. Of course, provided things are still stable here. So I can try to reach her if you'd like me to.
No.
But I'd also like Chief to come up and speak.
Dealing with what she needs to deal with.
And while he's approaching, when she says Primex, she means our insurance company. If the insurance company says, no way, we're not going to cover it, then we're in a bind, or we have to add some sort of a amendment to our insurance policy or something. It costs extra money. Yeah. Chief.
Oh, yeah. Does this work? Is this on?
It does.
Okay. Unfortunately, Lisa couldn't be here tonight. We've had a couple good conversations, as you've heard tonight. You know, it's ironic when we send all our children to a school, but we don't take any other actions to provide protection for these children. So I think that's what we really need to talk about. I know this has come up. I know the board has discussed this in some manner, and I think it's the right thing to do. Period. The end. And we have a situation where we have a retired New York City police officer who has the ability to carry a firearm. Under the rules federally, he can carry a firearm anywhere in the United States or any U.S. territory. That's just because he's a retired, good-standing police officer in the United States. So that helps us out at the same time. What I have done, not recently, but is I spoke to ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, because there are laws prohibiting firearms and drugs in school zones. More drugs than firearms. I don't think a lot of people know that. It's really not illegal to have a firearm on school grounds. And I think a lot of people believe that it is. It's not. Drugs are a different thing. But I think this is a great opportunity, to put an added layer of protection for the kids here at the school. And everybody knows what's going on throughout the country. I don't need to tell you that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of firearms that, in my opinion, are getting in the hands of people that have some mental health issues, and that's the real problem here, is keeping these firearms away from the people with these deficiencies. We see what happens, so why wouldn't we take a step and move forward and at least, put some type of investigation to the fact of what can we do to make the school safer? This is a decent-sized community. I'm not from around here. I didn't grow up around here. I came from a much larger community. But what does it matter? When I was a senior in high school in 1984, we had a shooting in our school, and one of the students was shot and killed by the police. Brought a shotgun to school, and so I didn't see it happen or anything to that nature, but that was 30-something years ago. So here we are today. We know it's in the media. We know it's happening. Everybody recognizes it. Yet we're not doing anything for this school right here. And say, well, we have the police officers out in the street. I have 13 cops. We have 7,500 people in town. We have 13 cops. This school is larger than most towns as far as population when everybody's together. And you're putting a bunch of people, 1,000 people, I don't really know what you have here anymore. And you're putting them all together, and we don't really have a good safety system in place. Yet we have school shootings or mass casualties all over the country. So I think we need to move forward with this, and I'd like to get some support on this. I know this is in its infancy. I know there's other things that we need to do. It's easy to sit up here and just talk about it, but there's some finite details that we need to put in place. We also have Primex, is our insurance carrier for the police department, for the town. I'd like to say that's going to help. I'm sure there's going to have to be some type of MOU between, either the insurance companies or the town. I brought it to our town administrator. He understands it. I'm sure he supports it. Lisa supports it. And I'd like to do something with this. I think Frank is fantastic for the school. And, it's really easier to have Frank down here than me have to have a second budget for an SRO. We all know what that can bring. Frank's a unique hire for the school, and I think for the most part, Frank fits in here very well. We'll take Frank under our wing. It's going to be a burden, trust me, but a little slow. Frank's already got a great foundation. He's got a great foundation that he uses here every day. He gets along well with everybody every day. I'm not talking putting Frank in a uniform or anything to that nature. We don't want to do that. We're talking a concealed weapon. That's it. Frank's not going to dress any different than he is now. And it should be Frank, period, the end. When you ask yourself, when you have all these children together, and if you can say, if I could lessen casualties by so many, percentage-wise, people-wise, because Frank's armed, he's here already, why aren't we doing anything? And that's what I think you have to ask yourself, that, internally. Why aren't we doing anything? You realize there's going to be a shooting. We've had 3 shootings in this town since I've been a police officer here, involving police officers.
We had a shooting at the school. You're aware of that?
We had just before, I was with another agency just before I came here, and you had a shooting at this school. So you already know what's going to happen, and that was a long time ago. So what are we going to do to curb this? What are we going to do to make this safer? And I really think Frank's the answer. There's nothing saying that we're going to be able to get down here in the first minute or 2 minutes, depending on what we have going on in town. I have limited resources just like everybody else. And you have days off, you have short days, you run a skeleton crew. We've all experienced that. And inevitably, that's when something happens. Murphy's Law. That's when it happens. So, it's incumbent upon us.
Now?
Pardon me?
Can you take some questions now?
I can take tons of questions.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone have any questions to start? All right, Brian.
First, thank you for coming. I appreciate the
having me. I
time.
appreciate it.
So a couple of questions I have. We had a conversation at our meeting up at the Gilsum School, and we heard from building principal, also Frank himself. So this proposal is still in line with what their idea of how to move forward as far as what they made for progress, with lowering incidents at the school. It does not hold Frank to a different standard as far as, how he can interact with students. Right, because, when we talked before, one of the concerns, a couple of concerns we heard is that a uniformed officer did not allow some specific types of conversation or even a level of question and answer,
Disclosure.
Yes, disclosure.
Or
Thank
leaving
you.
the jurisdiction. Yeah.
Correct. So this, just by carrying a concealed weapon, that's all we're talking about now. And when you say concealed, you mean not a non-uniform wearing visually, right? It's just they don't see it. So,
Right.
okay.
That's the best way to go.
Frank? Do you want to do this? Okay.
I'd like to hear from the
All right, Nick?
How about,
And just for the clarity, Frank will still technically be an SSO and not an SRO.
You got it.
So he
Not our employee.
Okay.
All I'd like to do is to be able to offer, the district the fact that I'm willing to take him under, because we have the same insurance companies. We need to iron that out. Let's be
Yeah.
real. That's really, some of the details are going to be difficult.
So step one is we figure out what the insurance will cover, and then we need to know from you, what's the next step? What would this board have to support in order to take the next step if we were to choose to?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Just a quick question. This is and I support it, okay? I'll go on record, I do support it. It's a departure from district policy right now, right? So would this require, is there any sense that this would require voter approval? Because it's such a massive departure.
This is something we should refer to council as well as we're ironing out the details.
And we
Make
have to
sure.
pull the policies too.
Yeah, the policies will need to be adjusted, no doubt.
Okay.
But that's more administrative on our part. But we want probably from legal counsel's guidance on how to wrap words around this exception or this approach.
Lisa. Come here. Yeah. Can you come talk to us for a sec?
Lisa, I have one other quick question.
Nick?
And just to hammer this point, Frank, as an SSO, being able to carry a concealed firearm, he'll still be able to travel to all of the elementary schools. Is this something that has to be discussed with all the towns that are involved in our district? It sounds like things are pretty ironed out with Swansea. But I just want to make sure that he has the ability to go to Troy or Fitzwilliam or Gilsum if he needs to. And so that's another question. I don't know if that's a question for you or a question for council or insurance, but I'd like to make sure that that's also clear, because we don't want Frank to be restricted in his ability to move throughout the district.
Right, I understand.
What do you think, Lisa?
I think it's the best scenario we have. We have the best of both worlds. If Frank is able to carry a firearm, we have somebody in the building who's able to take that first step. Not in Swansea, sorry. Swansea has, an incredible response time, but that 3 to 5 minutes where if there's a situation, it would be nice to have Frank to be armed. The other piece that I spoke about earlier when we were at Gilsum, Frank doesn't have to live up when we're doing an investigation, when we're doing a search, when we're doing any sort of active type of investigation. We have to do ours before we bring it to the police department, and they can't always be part of those conversations. Frank can, and so it gives us a little bit of a leeway to have somebody who's not associated with the police department but has a police background to sort of help guide and give us an insight as to what we need to do on our end in order to bring it forward to the police. So I think it would be the best of both worlds. To have him be armed and not to be a resource officer, but to be a district of the employee, or employee of the district.
Is there anyone that we know of in the district who does not support this idea at this time? Administrative or otherwise?
What?
No,
That's
it has
a
not been a
tough
topic
question.
at our administrative meetings. This is something that Lisa Witt, this is very much something that she's taking on.
Okay.
And she expressed she wouldn't have invited Chief here today if she hadn't decided to move forward with this idea.
Okay, all right. So if the board were to begin to move forward on this evening, it's, to our knowledge, everyone's on board so far, right?
I know
Safe to say?
we've had conversations, Chief, myself, and Tom, and Frank have had conversations around the comfortableness of the building level administration as well, and we're all comfortable with it.
Brian, you had something?
I was crafting my motion, sorry.
I was gonna say, are you looking for a motion?
Yeah, we're looking for a motion, since Brian can't.
So
Can't craft
I'd like
fast
to move that the board proceed with finding out more information on insurance, relative to legal counsel, and relative to the ability for Frank to move throughout the district while carrying a concealed firearm.
And pay? Are we gonna ask, and pay? Are we talking about a pay increase?
We're not talking about that right now. Betty?
Friendly amendment. Instead of using Frank's name, can we
We'll have
say
to look at his
SSO?
evaluation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, so, yeah. Friendly amendment.
So that was the motion. Is there a second?
Is
You
there a
wanna use
second?
SSO?
Second.
Second is from Rob. More discussion?
Chief, we were together with Lisa Witt in her first year when we did that side-by-side document of. Yeah. So when you use the phrase, "take Frank under your wing," aside from sort of walking through the insurance and, endorsing the concealed firearm, is there any other particular ideas you have about what that relationship looks like, how it changes? Does he carry a radio, for example, or anything else?
Well, the radio he carries now, we have your channel in our portable, in our cruisers.
Okay.
So we hear every day.
Yeah, our
You guys-
radios in this building go to them, so
Yes.
they hear our
Okay.
channel
No
one.
kidding.
So that works out really well. So when we can hear you at the base station at the PD. So we always have an ear going on. And, and we can we can tell when something exciting is going on just by the way everybody talks.
Yeah.
Nature of the beast. So we kind of perk up a little bit.
Okay.
So that works out really well already. When I say taking Frank under our wing, what I'm really saying is that there's a level of readiness that he has to have. And, Frank's been retired for a while. We know that. It shows. So what we want to do is, there's some tactical stuff that we, going to have to bring him up to speed on. I have 2 master firearms instructors. I'm very fortunate. We train, Keen and I, our 2 departments train back and forth. So we have a great relationship with them, so we can share resources. It's great networking, with the other agencies in the area. So I think it's going to be a good marriage. And I know we make sure it's going to be cost effective and it's going to be, legal, ethical, and moral, what we want to do. But I think we're moving in the right direction to do this. It's another added layer for the children. 3 to 5 minutes, and generally, a lot of these shootings and casualties are over. And depending on where we are, we don't know, when we can get you. So.
I qualify every, I'm sorry. I qualify every year.
Another hidden skill.
I qualify every year with the police department, so I can carry my gun any place in the country. It's something I do. I do the same qualification that every police officer in New Hampshire does. So I'm actually qualified already.
All right, and, yeah, Rob.
So I can see the next question. My kid's at Cutler. She's not, or he's not at the high school. I don't know how to capture this. Is there any data to suggest, or is there a sense out there that the high schools, the older kids are at a greater risk for this type of behaviors on campus than the younger schools? So I guess where I'm headed with this is, how did you guys decide that Frank would reside at the high school and not at one of the other schools?
Half of our district's at the high school, at the middle school, high school. Right off the bat, the numbers in this building are a solid half of the whole district.
Also, Frank was hired in the aftermath of our most recent SRO versus SSO discussion and et cetera.
No, I get that, but in terms of having an armed officer in the building, whether it be Frank or someone else, an armed person. And again, I support this, okay? Totally. I just want to be prepared for the discussion when people say, how come there's no one at Mount Caesar? How come there's no one at Emerson? How come there's no one at Troy?
In an ideal world, we'd have somebody in every school,
Right.
but can we do that?
Okay, but there's no statistics that say the high school is the most prone.
Yes, there is.
There are.
There
You
is,
just said
but
there-
yeah.
you have the most people here. That's a statistic.
I was referring more age-specific than...
I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but the School Safety Preparedness Task Force Report 2018 just came out, and it gives stats on 57% of shooters are current student, and 33% known to police, known to staff 76%, in school legitimately 68%. And given that most shooters are not 12 years old or younger, this indicates that this would be at the high school level for the
Great
most part.
information, thank you. I'm done.
All right, any other questions?
No, I'd like to say thank you for
Thank you.
coming and speaking.
All right, so the motion on the table is for us to proceed with investigating whether the SSO is able to be armed per our insurance, legal counsel, and whether he could still move throughout the district with the firearm.
Whose motion was it?
It was Nick's.
Would you take a friendly to also include a memorandum of understanding? A draft of a memorandum of understanding for the board to review.
Between who and who?
District and Swansea Police Department.
District and Swansea Police Department. Just so that we don't, and the reason
Sure,
that I ask
yeah.
that is, we get down this road and then it's another month, 2 months, 3 months before we get that.
My motion was really meant to be all-inclusive of everything we need to,
Okay.
Thank you.
to learn and understand.
All right, so you took that friendly, and I think Betty was the second? Yeah? And you're good with that?
Definitely.
All right, so we're voting on the all-inclusive motion on
No,
all
Nick
of the
was
next
the-
steps necessary to help this to
You have a question?
Laura?
Was it not Betty?
I thought I had Brian, but I could be very wrong.
That was actually the
Well, if it's someone else, that's okay.
Brian, are you okay with it?
Sure.
Okay. Everyone's good with it. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, good. We'll let Lisa know that we're ready to take next steps to
Bravo.
help this to move forward. Very good. Can I say something else on school safety while we're under that item? Even though it's the superintendent's report? Yeah. I did want to mention to the full board that the School Safety Preparedness Task Force put out their report in 2008. It's a 2018 report that's supported by a governor's commission. I got my copy from my select board, and other copies are forthcoming. It's sort of hot off the press. Anyone who's interested, I'll make sure you get the PDF, and I'll find out how we can get hard copies of it. Even Frank hasn't seen it yet, so, but it does say things that are very interesting in here. Some of them are on topics that we're already addressing as a school district, so we'll learn a little more about mental health first aid, which we're already doing. It has a focus on badges and doors, which we're already doing. It has many, many recommendations, and I feel good about what I see so far just in the first glance, that we're absolutely headed in the right direction as a school district, and this is going to give us more guidance on what we need to think about if we haven't already thought about it. Also, I sat in on the final safety committee meeting that took place in the town of Troy. So these safety committee meetings were taking place in each of the buildings throughout the district. I understand that school board members weren't able to make it to the other safety committee meetings, but really what was happening there in each of the meetings was that the principal pulled together sort of a task force, a couple of people who were volunteers from each school, and they talked about what was important in their school, first steps that they could take toward increasing safety in their own building. And then these groups have made commitments to meet either monthly or bi-monthly going forward, whatever works for that particular building. So the one that I witnessed in Troy School was really productive. They talked about, Frank, was it grab and go bags that we talked about in the safety meeting? Yeah. So it's a
It's more of a bag that you have items in it that are going to be essential if there is something, a shooting.
Yeah.
Tourniquets, the gauze that stops the bleeding, duct tape. There's going to be, we're going to have to come together and design a bag that's going to be good for the school.
So that was one of the topics that each of the schools talked about. It was also widespread discussion about the badges and the doors, like I said.
We started on the basics, make sure all doors are locked at all times. They could be left open, but they got to be on a wedge where it's knocked out and the door closed, the shade is down. The basics are getting started right now. And every meeting, I've been to every one of them, every meeting gets a little better.
So we have a school board focus on safety. It's one of our 3 goals. And so we're moving forward in this fashion in each of the buildings. Now we have the established committees, and they're going to be working on this, making it important. So continue. I'm sorry.
No, don't be. That's helpful. So as Lisa said, all of the schools have had their safety meetings so far. So they all have had the opportunity to meet since Lisa talked to you about this, and she wanted you to know that. And one of her big takeaways is that at all locations, the collaboration with the local emergency response folks is absolutely a strength, that the schools and the local emergency people are working together very closely, and she's quite happy with that. Point of information, the Homeland Security audit was completed at Emerson last week, and I don't believe there's a report about it yet, but they did come through and do that audit, so we should have some information on that. And another point of information, on October 6th in this building, there is going to be an active shooter drill. And we want people to know about that because it's going to look big and loud. And we want people to know that it is a drill. It's being done by Swansea Fire Department with police and other. Yep.
Brandon West is really taking the lead on it. Frank will be here all day at 7:30 to 3:30-ish. Personnel is only here in the morning from 7:30 to 12. They'll take a break, and then kids are coming in to help them role play victim scenarios.
Okay, so it's not while the students are in school?
No, it's a Saturday.
Okay.
Yep. So we're just sort of letting people know that if you can stay away from the building at that point. You can't get in, so the building will be closed down.
Okay, thank you.
Good job.
So that is it thank you, Lisa. That's it for the school safety report. The next thing on Lisa's report is personnel and hiring update. So if you want, yep.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, actually, about what you talked to me about.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Just so you know, for point of information, there was a letter that was sent home to families at Cutler. We did get a letter from the state giving us a kind of a precaution that the copper levels in the water were a little bit high at Cutler. They're not dangerously high; they're elevated, and they want us to watch it. Dave is aware of it and is taking appropriate action. The water's being tested and monitored very closely. We have not been asked to stop using the water. Like I said, the letter was precautionary to give us a heads up.
Thank you.
I think what I read too said that there are some fountains that are already filtered, and those are turned on, but the ones that aren't filtered
Yes.
are turned off.
Yep. So we do have our.
That is thing
Yeah.
up there.
Yep.
That's a precautionary thing that we just went forward with. I said, okay, let's just take the fountains, the old fountains, we'll just shut them down for now. We do know that all the water bottle fountains that you have in the schools, they have a filter in them that will filter out lead, copper, all that. So we just said, okay, let's just cut this for right now, and we're gonna have them drink out of that. In fact, I ordered 2 more to replace some of the older fountains there. Okay, we just said, let's just put these in.
That's pretty awesome. I think the
Okay.
student who led that project.
We put a filter in the kitchen that will do the same thing for anything that they may fill with a pot. Doesn't, we just said, okay, let's just do it. We're not gonna have to worry about anything, and we'll test as we move forward. 3 years ago, the same thing happened, I think, maybe 4 years ago. It's a work in progress a little bit, but instead of worrying about it, we just said, okay, let's take care of this. So that's how we took care of it on our end already. We have not installed the other 2 fountains. We need some time. They're in the walls. There's some work that has to be done. And it's more like Christmas when we have a week's break that we'll be able to do this.
Brian and then
Rob, do you have a question?
I have two
Oh, two.
first, if I could.
Okay.
He was first in line.
One, do we know what the cause is? So is it school? Is it
No, we don't yet.
coming from the town somewhere, or are we talking
You
school?
know, it can be, what happens is if we're gonna call it the pH levels they're, I believe, too high, they can, like, wear at your copper lines. So the pH level needs to, and they said that within the line that we need to be in, but we're maybe on the upper line of that. So we're just watching that. We may have to, it's a little more to it than just saying, yes, pH. I can't really give you that answer. I'm not sure yet,
Fair enough.
okay?
So have we tested the water after it comes out of the fountains with the filters?
We will be. Oh, those, yes.
Yeah.
Those
So
are
we
fine.
know that the water
Yeah,
coming out
yeah.
of the filters
That's
is
right.
in line?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we have Dan Crosby do all that testing. Okay?
I was just saying that those fountains with the filters, the water bottle fillers, that was a student-led
Yes, it was.
initiative, and it was such a great idea. We see it paying off now. It makes me really proud.
We have one going in over to Mount Caesar when we get that. It's work, like when you're doing a block wall and cutting them out and stuff like that. For us, that's a little more work than just a couple hours in the morning or anything like that. It takes some time, so we need some time.
So this is something you'll get back to us on,
Oh, yeah, we'll get it, what, as far as the water goes?
right, as far as,
Yeah.
as far as
This year, you
identifying?
gotta remember, this year, every fountain, every hot, cold side of everything with the new lead laws has to be tested before July 1st. We're gonna start that sooner than later. For the fact we have any issues, I think there's some grant money out there now that just came up. I saw it today, that's a possibility. I think Neil sent me something on that. That there is some, if you have issues, and I think it's more towards the well side of things, but we'll see what that is. I really haven't read into it that much yet.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for Dave? Good.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Open positions. So Lisa wanted me to report out on open positions, and Kathy's going to speak to one of them in just a moment. Also, just so you know, I'm passing around notification of current fundraisers and special events, and it's just notification for you. So open positions. Right now, we have one special ed paraprofessional for MRMHS that needs to be filled. We have the 4 regular ed paraprofessionals that were approved at the last school board meeting. There's a .6 special ed teacher at Gilsum. I have a Title I part-time position open at Cutler, a reading specialist at Cutler, and 1 school psychologist specifically for Monadnock Regional Middle High School. And Kathy wants to come up and speak about a solution we might have to that issue.
Well, it wouldn't solve that issue.
Well, no,
but it would solve a part of that issue. Because we have no school psychologist in place at the middle high school, and we do continue to look both for an employee or for a contracted service provider. But we have at least 15 students who are without their counseling. So one solution would be to use some of the funding that's available in that salary line for the school psychologist to fund a .6 position as a social worker. Their sole job would be to provide those IEP services, specifically that counseling that's required by those students' IEPs. So it would require a transfer of funds, and because it's a new position, I'm asking for your approval for that new position. But I would also add that I think that 60% special ed position in Gilsum would be a great one for a retired special ed teacher. So call all your relatives and friends who are retired special educators, because it would be a terrific job for somebody who's retired. It would be within their hours.
What are the qualifications?
You need to be a certified special education teacher in New Hampshire.
Brian?
So, by not getting those services that are written into the program, we're talking about potential compliance issues.
That's correct.
Again, after you
All the work we've
specifically and your team just worked so hard to finally get us back into compliance.
Yes, correct.
All right.
Is it a shortage of those type of personnels? Is it the salary that we're offering? Is it just a weird year? Is it?
Generally speaking, when we've had, well, in my short time here, when we've had psychology openings, we have had a number of candidates, and we're in a position to choose out of that pool of candidates who were appropriately licensed and what have you. This year, we've had a few people apply. I've also interviewed some people from contracting service agencies who I just don't want working in our schools. So it's kind of a combination of things, because I'm not a subscriber to the warm body solution.
My follow-up to that would just be, if going forward as we enter the budget process, if you think that it is a budget or a salary issue, that we address it then, because it seems to be critical to your being able to deliver services.
So that they are, the school psychologists are part of the specialist CBA. So it would have to be a negotiated item.
Okay.
Brian?
So say someone in the group here made a motion to move forward with your idea or proposal. What happens then with the seeking of a full-time psychologist here, if we're going to take money from that lane?
Right. We would continue our search for a school psychologist, and there would continue to be enough for them to do here as a full-time person. Where, as we continue through the year, we
Recognize the savings.
we have some savings that we've achieved by not having somebody in the position.
So is this a temporary through the end of the school year?
Yes, just through the end of this school year.
And if we did find someone to fill the full-time position, we would keep both on through the
Yes.
end of the school year?
Because we will, those students who have been missing their services have the right to have those made up. So there'll be plenty to do.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Ready?
Yes.
So do you have something before? Okay, I'd like to make a motion then, and you can fine-tune my wording here to support your request. But make a motion to direct you to seek your part-time social worker. Is that what I'm looking for here?
All right, and
And the needed transfer of funds.
As specified.
Nick,
Yes.
Was there a second?
do you want to be the second?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
A second. And then my question is, I assume it's already taken care of, but it has to be asked. This is, receive the stamp of Lisa?
Yes.
Okay.
And under other discussion, Betty?
And so do I understand, you think you have enough money in savings to cover both a school psychologist till June and a .6 social worker till June?
Yes, depending on how many evaluations that we are currently covering through some contracted services, it could be that we don't hire a full-time psychologist for the remainder of the year. We will be in a position to make that decision as we continue.
What are the qualifications of a school psychologist? Do they have to be a certified educator?
Well, so there's a New Hampshire Department of Education certification for a school psychologist and one for an associate school psychologist. The qualifications, frankly, are the same, so either one would be sufficient. There are times that you can find a clinically nationally licensed psychologist who wants to work in a school, and in those cases, their license trumps the New Hampshire Department of Education certification. But we would seek somebody who's duly certified or licensed.
That's what I was wondering, though. Like, it can be any psychologist if they're willing to work in a school.
No. I think she said they have to be certified.
Well, yes, they
Right.
would be.
But there's also, So if they're licensed as a clinical psychologist, that too could be acceptable.
All right, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you.
Happy hunting.
Thank you.
All right, is there anything more to Lisa's report?
No, we will just need one non-public under C.
I have a related question. So on the topic of open positions.
Yep.
Jeremy, how are we doing on applicants?
They're drying up a little bit for a couple of them. Kathy could speak better to the special ed because I haven't been watching that one very closely, but because there is no one, I'm assuming that we don't have a large pool.
For the Gilson position, there were a couple of applications. Those folks had received other positions before we were able to interview them, and we've had no one apply since that time.
For the reading specialist, a similar situation. We had not qualified people who are not certified as a reading specialist. In New Hampshire, you have to be a certified reading specialist to hold that position. And there are routes to get people certification if they already hold an elementary ed certification. But to do that, the district's taking on a pretty big agreement, and you have to have the right person to want to do that alternative route, and they were not able to find the candidate that they were looking for to do that with. The Title I part-time is a tough one. We knew that was going to be a tough one. It's a 20-hour-a-week position, so that's really, for a specific person that wants that, and we're not too worried about that. And as far as the paraprofessionals go, they're chugging through. I believe I'm bringing notification tonight. So, no, I'm not. I take that back. So it's happening. It's slow.
What about substitutes? We are seeking substitutes.
We are seeking substitutes, and we are, I just brought a big stack down to Dale of, going through the people. For anyone who doesn't know, when substitute applies, they have to go through the same process of having references checked and coming in and meeting with Dale and doing the paperwork. And Dale Nelson, our personnel coordinator, is pushing through them as fast as absolutely possible.
So I asked the question to offer up, maybe for next meeting, that there's speculation that because the rates in our, some of our contracts are so low that we can't attract people in this market, right? And I was wondering what the real truth of that is. I was thinking maybe if we could dig a little deeper into substitute shortage, lack of applicants. Is it marketing? Is it the pay rate? Is it qualification? All those things. Yeah.
I mean, I can definitely speak to the paraprofessionals that is absolutely an issue, and we did lose a couple good candidates because they just couldn't make the entry rate work. I believe Lisa shared that with you as well.
So maybe we're going a little faster than I thought we would, but I was going to suggest at some point we ask legal counsel for advice about what we can do with that. We're in a contract with a union, a bargaining unit, and the rates are the rates, but what can we do in a short-term fashion of any kind?
You have to go back to the table.
Yeah. Is that our only path, or are there other things that we're at liberty to do when we're in a shortage? Can we hire people outside of the bargaining unit? Can we pay additional things? What are our options? Or are we just stuck? I'd like to hear that
I would
definitively.
second that. I'd like to hear more.
All right,
I'll
so,
ask Lisa to put that in her superintendent's report.
okay, thank you. So we do have applicants for subs. It's just that we need to get through the paperwork and stuff, right? So we're not worried about that.
No.
Okay.
I mean, there's never enough substitutes. That's the reality of that situation, but we're doing everything we possibly can do, and we do have a large pool of applicants for substitutes.
Actually, maybe there's another angle to look at, which is if we do not have all the subs we need, if all the paraprofessional positions are not filled, and we don't have all the subs we need on a particular day in a particular school, it could be a one-day thing, or it could be a constant all the time thing. Are we falling down on compliance with student IEPs? could we get some detail on that in the future?
Yep.
All right.
Good.
Yes, can we have the middle school VEX update, please?
Yep. So, this is no longer superintendent report, this is education report.
Put on your other hat?
I'll go fast on this one. So coming around to you, as part of this, the regular education check-in on the list of things that people asked for to see, and we'll make sure that link gets out there again. And please, if there's things that you want me to touch on in these education reports specifically, let me know. We're doing kind of the quick overview topics and then the higher level departmental sort of things. So we're just kind of plowing through these. Someone asked about VEX. So for those of you who don't know, VEX is, in essence, it's the 7th and 8th grade specials, to use the word that the elementary schools use. Some middle schools call them unified arts. You can look at them as electives, sort of. They're not necessarily elective classes. Some of them are required classes. And this is the list of what's being offered this year. The way our VEXs work is the students have 2 VEX classes a quarter. So our schedule operates on an A-B schedule. So they have an A-day VEX and a B-day VEX. And the VEX classes run for about an hour and a half. It's a full block at the end of every day. We have a few required, and PE specifically, they take twice a year. They'll take it 2 semesters a year in both 7th and 8th grade. As far as the rest of them that aren't required, they may get it once in the 2 years unless it's a language or band, and then there's a priority made for that so that kids can get the full experience of that.
Right.
So these offerings on this list, are they in line with the Cheshire Career Center? As far as, we're talking about numbers that are down for the Career Center that we're sending students out to. I'm wondering is this an avenue that we can use to create early interest into seeking something down the road that would in turn end up increasing our interest in that program, in our numbers?
Certainly, some of them absolutely are. Some of them are a direct pathway to that sort of thing. The woodworking, the metalworking, the food. Those are all CTE type courses that kids might want to go into. I do want to reiterate, though, I believe, and Lisa Spencer and I have talked a lot about this, one of our biggest issues with Cheshire Career Center is not interest, it's scheduling. I just really want to be very clear that I feel that's a big part of our problem, and it's not a lack of interest, it's a lack of availability.
Rob.
So in talking about that, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole,
Yep.
but maybe for a future education report, swing back, I'd like to hear more about the discussion about when that schedule changed, because when that schedule, the master schedule changed, is when I've been able to, from what I hear and see, right, that a massive drop-off happened with the Cheshire Career Center. So I'd like to see if that's true, if my thought is true.
Yeah, Keens and Monadnocks both had major master schedule changes.
Well, only
Yeah.
with us, but, right, and if so, is there anything we can do to the schedule to free up time for those kids to go to those, to make that, a reality?
Sure. I could talk on it all night, so I'll wait until it's on the agenda.
Thank you.
Yep.
We're going to make sure it gets on there next meeting.
You get another hand up.
Kristen, I'm going to call on you because I thought.
I just, forgive me, but can you just tell me what's Designing Minds? What is that?
Designing Minds is intro graphic design course.
What's Illustrate and Invent?
Illustrate and Invent is more of a science-based course.
And production. What kind of production?
I can,
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that sort of production, gotcha.
Thank you, Rob. I was going to make it up if I had to. I'm not
We
going to.
still offer typing? Teach students how to type?
That's an interesting question. We do not have typing courses necessarily. We do have technology courses, and we are going to be putting out soon. I've finally whittled down a typing program in the elementary schools to get kids practicing typing more.
Best thing
Is it all
I
of
took
the
it as a
fingers
VEX
or
class
just
here.
thumbs?
This course really looks at all the different ways kids can coach.
And
Go ahead, Kristen.
for Win, what's woodchucks? Is that
Woodchucks is woodworking.
woodworking?
Jeremy, aside from the schedule, what's working, what's not working? What's hot, what's not?
For Vex?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, woodchucks is always extremely popular. Phys ed is very popular. Anything with the sciences usually take off. I don't know about metals, so I can't answer that, but I would assume. The Vexes are pretty popular courses this year. The teachers really work to create Vexes that kids want to take. They're not electives in that classic sense. I mean, kids have to take 2 Vex classes. That's just what it is. But the idea is to make them classes that the kids really want to take, to really get them interested in what they might want to start looking at in the upper levels for their electives and a path they want to go on. Spanish and band, of course, are popular. Rob's working very, very hard to build that middle school band program and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's a very important part of our Vex schedule.
Is it a problem, though, that both band and Spanish are during wind time?
It's not a problem. They're watching that closely to make sure that those kids aren't losing an opportunity to receive extra support if they need it.
So that's what I need, right?
Yeah, so it's definitely a conversation that I had with the middle school when it came up that it can't be, Vex at all costs. We have to pay attention to that and not give kids that need support an unfair push. So they're working through
Does this mean
that.
if you're in band, you can't take a Spanish class if you're in middle school?
No, they're opposite of each other, correct, Rob?
Last year it wasn't, you couldn't be in an honors language class if you were in band, but this year, so instead of teaching middle school band every other day and teaching Spanish every other day, the Spanish teacher and I just agreed to split those students every day for half the time.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of work and sacrifice on us because we're, I don't want to repeat young, but, we're working to make sure that the students are getting what they want.
Thank you very much.
She had her hand up.
Kristen?
What does win block mean?
Win is something that we have K to 12. It's what I need. It's a block of time for students to receive extra support, intervention in either math, science, social studies, reading, behavior, anything that they might need extra support in. And it's a block that we've designated in all grade levels.
Great.
So the teachers, if they notice that a certain student is falling behind or didn't get their homework in, they can sign the kid up to come in during the what I need block.
Great.
And so the student has to go and report to that classroom and do the work, or receive the support that they need to figure out how to do the work.
Do we do detention anymore?
It's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, and it is to support them to get the work done, but it's not necessarily for work completion. It's not. Win
not
is
like
not
a
a
study
punishment.
hall.
It's absolutely not a consequence of not doing work. The purpose of Win is to support you if you're having difficulty doing your work. Yep.
She just asked if we still have detention.
I was just, okay. Mostly
We have
joking.
in-school suspension too. Yeah. Any other questions? Rob?
I was just wondering, does anybody ever reach out to the kids in a meaningful way and find out what they want that maybe we don't offer?
I can anecdotally say yes, but I can't say that there's a mechanism or a system in place that I could point to that happens. I know the idea is that the teachers are designing the courses based on the student feedback, and they talk to the students about that. The courses, this is my third year, fifth year being up towards the middle school and understanding that process, and I've seen different VEX classes every year based on teacher availability, student needs, because a lot of the VEX classes, no, all the VEX classes are being taught by teachers who are also teaching high school courses as well, so it's got to fit into their schedule. So you have to look at availability every year based on the course load, but it changes often. So anecdotally, yes, but I don't know that it's systematic.
Any other questions?
I have one more.
All right,
So
Brian.
if a teacher wanted to try a different VEX class, that a topic of discussion every year then? They can just come in and say, hey, I have an idea.
Yes.
What do you think? And
Absolutely, yeah.
Here's my proposal.
And it's the same for 9 through 12 as well. If a teacher wants to do a new course, if they want to try something different, there is a system in place for that, where they have to request permission, they talk to guidance, they talk to the principal, and the principal usually will consult with me to see what I think and look at the credits and that piece, same with the VEX, and then they'll be able to put that into place if they think it's an appropriate course. And there's
That's where
place for
guitar
it.
and keyboard came from recently. It was just somebody's brainchild, and then it became a class.
Yep.
All right. Student mental health.
Okay, so student mental. So I'm sorry, I was a little bit off on this. I thought we were talking about health curriculum in general, so I'm going to start with a quick overview of that just to explain where this comes from. We really are looking at our health curriculum. We're looking at mental health, physical health, emotional health, K-12, and I've talked to you about that a few times over the last year or two, about the different things that we're doing. And there is a team, a curriculum team led up by Matt Karen. He's a PE teacher at the middle high school, and he's working really, really hard with a group of very dedicated teachers and nurses to look at how are we dealing with health, K-12? How are we dealing with mental and emotional and physical health all the way up? And along with that, I'm pretty excited to say that our January PD Day is going to be focused on health in all three of those cases, and to talk about the work that they've been doing and really showcase what we want to do and what we're doing. A big part of that is that mental health piece. And, when we talk about the mental health piece, this is something that we're really looking at. How do we support our students, our faculty, our staff with that mental health piece in the school? And one of the ways we're doing that is there's a course. It's called Mental Health First Aid. And we were lucky enough, I've talked a lot about our connection with Keene State and all the work we've been doing with the Southwest Center, and they had a lot of grant money. They reached out to me a couple months ago and gave us 2 spots to have train the trainers in this mental health first aid program. And it's pretty intense to train the trainer. It was a 2-day training. It was 16 hours. Matt Karen went, and Melissa Johnson, who's one of our social workers, went, and they are now mental health first aid trainers. Mental health first aid is really, it's a course that helps everyone who works with others to be able to look for warning signs of mental health and addiction concerns, to look for depression and mood disorder concerns, anxiety concerns, trauma, psychosis. What's really important that everyone understands is that we are educators. We are not practitioners of health. We are not able to diagnose or to, we're not clinicians. Our role is not to do those things, but it is our job to be looking out for warning signs and to talk to the people who do need to know those things and who can take action, and including parents and including health professionals in that. So we're pretty excited about that. They both went and got the training, and we're trying to look at now how do we get as many people trained in this mental health first aid as we possibly can.
So what age range does that cover?
K-12.
K-12.
I mean, the mental health first aid is a program for all people.
Okay.
They're specifically focused on K-12. But they have the ability now, they have the I don't know if it's a certification, but they've gotten the go-ahead, they've got the materials from the courses to do some trainings. And we're working now, I'm working with Matt and Melissa to say, how can we get as many of our school staff trained in this? Because, just like first aid or CPR, the more people who know it, the better chance, if you need it, that you have all the support that you need. It's a 4-hour training. So it's hard to fit in, it's 2 4-hour blocks. It's hard to fit into the day because, they can train 20, 30 people at one time, but we can't pull 20, 30 people out of school at one time. After school would be hard. We'd have to break it into many 2-hour trainings, so it would take a very long time. So we're working on that, and we're seeing how do we fit that in? How do we fit it into our PD days? Who's interested? You don't really push people into this, just like first aid or CPR. You ask people who are interested in having these skills and this knowledge. And making sure that they're comfortable with it.
Sorry, there was a question that came up earlier tonight. How many how many teachers do we have who are first aid and CPR certified? Are they all?
Are they all? No, absolutely not. Nope, not all teachers are CPR and first aid. We have CPR and first aid certified people in every building. because we have to, and we do a lot of updating. All of our ACES staff, because they're after school and because there's only 1 or 2 of them sometimes in the building, are required to do their first aid and CPR training. They're doing training next week. We have some people renewing their training next week, so we keep up with it. This is our next piece that we want to add. So it's important, it's an important piece of what we're doing. And when I talked about the youth risk assessment survey, behavior survey, sorry, I'm getting tired. I talked about good things. We have a lot of good numbers on that, and we see a lot of good trends. But the reality is that even our good trends means that we have some kids who are still experiencing difficulty in school and who need help, and we want to make sure that we're there to guide them to that help.
Do we have any proactive assessments, like simple questionnaires, 10 questions, maybe rank on a scale of 1 to 10, how many days out of the week do I feel hopeless or whatever? Because a lot of schools are doing those proactive mental health assessments.
Yeah. We have to be really careful with those because of the new state law. We can't give those anymore without, that's an opt-in situation. It's not even an opt-out. So anytime we wanted to do a questionnaire like that, you have to have opt-in permission from parents because of the new RSA that went through early last year that I've told you guys about. So we don't have that other than the youth health behavior assessment, because that one has been excluded in that RSA, where we have permission to give that.
And you might have said this, I was looking down at something. Bravo for doing it, great job. Is there any thought, like, for example, was it this Friday we have a teacher workshop, and I'm not saying do it this Friday, but wouldn't that be a subject for a really valuable, meaningful, student changing program for a workshop day?
Yep. So we plan the workshop days in advance, and we just got this offer a couple months ago. So our workshop day is coming up. Friday is the parent-teacher conference day. And then Monday, we are our parent-teacher conference day for classroom teachers, and paraprofessionals are with Kathy, and I don't know exactly what they're doing because that's Kathy. And then Monday, our staff, our whole SAU is working with the Keene SAU to do different workshop day. We were asked by Keene if we wanted to join in and do a joint workshop day. The January one is totally health-based. That's the whole purpose of it. So Matt and Melissa and I are talking about how can we do this during that day. Is it possible to do it and get some people start doing that? So absolutely. It's just putting all the pieces together and make it work. But absolutely, it's a perfect topic for those days.
Great,
and it's very
subject.
meaningful.
Great job.
We're talking about health and wellness, and it reminds me that I need to ask who on this board is the representative to the Health and Wellness Committee? I'm pretty sure that we assigned one and nobody remembers that it was them.
Karen, I think.
Was it? Okay.
I think it's Karen.
All right. Because I know that they're looking for somebody to come to
Don't
their
be
meetings.
I think.
Is there anyone else, is there anyone who would like to volunteer as a second member of the school board to join the Health and Wellness Committee? Because I know they want someone to be present at their meetings, and it seems like if we have one designee and that person can't make it, it'd be nice to have a backup. Anyone? Karen? Okay, I'll see if I can connect you with, it's Janine, right? And so we can get you on board with when they're meeting.
Okay, I was going to say, is it usually right after school? Is that
I think it is
Yes.
right after school.
I think they actually start around 4 usually,
Oh, that'd be perfect.
so that the elementary people have a chance to get up there.
I think that's when the full committee meets, but they're doing some planning work on, I think, first block on B days.
Well, you've got a couple different committees going on. You've got the middle high school wellness committee. You've got the district wellness committee, which is kind of the official committee that a school board member usually sits on. And then you've got the health curriculum group, and they're splitting tasks basically. Like the middle high school wellness committee is really working to bring in wellness programs to the middle high school and do immediate work. The health curriculum people are looking K to 12 and big picture, what are we doing for health education K to 12, and looking at specifically curriculum, not programs or things to bring in. And then the district wellness committee meets, nutrition is part of that, nurses are part of that, and they're looking at district-wide wellness and how we fit in with RSA and best practice.
Okay, so is it safe to say that if I contact Janine and say, hey, where was it that you wanted this person
That
that
would
you
be
were
the way to go.
missing?
Yep.
That would, okay.
So she might be asking for a school board person to come in to talk to the middle high school and be part of that conversation. I'm not sure. She sits on all three, so
Okay.
I'm not sure which one she would be inviting to.
My to-do list. All right. Is that it for your report?
That's it.
We have a request from the Swansea Select Board, and I do believe that that would have come to us with Cheryl this evening, but she's not present, so we're going to have to skip over that part, unless someone is aware of what this request was from the Swansea Select Board. It happened when the CRC met with them in person. Is anyone else there?
Not sure, I got there late. I had another meeting and I'm not sure what it was.
All right. We were asked if we could discuss the unallocated, wow, the surplus for 17-18.
Allocated.
I can say unallocated, yes. Can you help us understand how much we had in unallocated funds for 17-18? Or is that not clear yet?
It's not clear yet. We don't have that definitive number. I'm still trying to wrap up the FY17 audit. We're getting pretty close, but there's a good potential that it'll change our fund balance. And so because of that, I don't feel comfortable giving you an exact dollar.
Okay. Do we have anything that is coming out of the unallocated funds, waiting for those funds to free up?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Sometimes we have motions or warrant articles that say to be taken from surplus at the end of the year, if there is any. One I can think of is maybe the emergency fuel fund. We've done that in the past. But you're not aware of any?
No.
Okay. Any other questions about that? Nick, you asked for us to discuss more detail about school supply best practices.
Yeah, so I said I'd come up with some additional questions. I think I'd like to, I took a look at what some different schools do in terms of some of the consumables or instructional materials, and it seems like there's a wide variety of practices. Some schools seem to be like militant in ensuring that those supplies are available, and then some schools almost completely depend on donations. I think it's going to tie a little bit into the policy that was passed earlier tonight in terms of learning supplies. Is it ID or what was
IJ,
it? IJ.
yeah.
So I think we need to look at what that policy is going to bring forth in terms of ensuring that the policy is followed. But my concern, I kind of have two concerns. The first is just general supplies for keeping things clean. I mean, I don't think that should be dependent. I don't think teachers or anybody should have to kind of depend on donations in order to maintain the basic cleanliness of the school. That's, I mean, we wouldn't ask the administration to start bringing in their own toilet paper or something like that. You know, so I think that should be taken care of, and not something that depends on some sort of feedback system of whether or not we have, you know, basic cleaning supplies. If they're not stocked, then they need to be ordered. I mean, does that make sense?
I think Jeremy has a response. I have something to say, and then also Rob.
So just to kind of give you, we've really talked to teachers about this so that we could talk to you about this and really understand what's going on. And I know from my own practice, the school supply list or the wish list. So the cleaning supplies is a good one, or tissues. Teachers are always asked. We have parents that always say, what can I do to help out? What can I do to help in your class? What does your class need? So that is an opportunity to say, oh, you know what? Clorox wipes are a great thing to have on hand so we don't have to use the spray. And because we are stocked with cleaning supplies. We do have disinfectant. We do have paper towels. We do have tissues. They're not Puffs Plus with aloe. They're their, industrial Kleenex, so that wish list, I don't know, and I think this is a communication thing, and I was talking to Betty about this a little bit too. That wish list is, teachers put that out because parents always say, what can we add to the room? How do we make the room a more a place? And I don't think that the wish list is going home as a requirement, but I don't know that all parents are getting that communication. So that's something that we were talking about, that, hey, these are not things that we have to have, but these are things that would, if you have this desire to help out, these are things that we want, because we always get that question from parents. As far as the general school supplies, again, you get a lot of questions from parents saying, what would help my kids? What would we do? And we did a survey. We looked around. The elementary schools in general really don't ask for any general school supplies at all. We say, hey, I'll send pencils in, send this in if you want. Kids always bring school supplies, but in the elementary schools, we pretty much have it covered. Middle high school, it's a little bit different, 7 and 8, and then 9 through 12. 9 through 12 basically says, these are the things that would help you, but, you're a 9th through 12th grader. You're going to have what you have to have. So, yes, a binder. Yes, loose leaf would help. And if you can't get it, let us know. 7th and 8th has the most comprehensive supply list. And that's something I started talking with Ryan and Lisa about, saying, well, K through 6 doesn't have a real list, and 9 through 12 doesn't have a real list, but 7th and 8th has this really intense list. And what happened was, again, this was a communication error that we have to look at how things are going out. There was a general suggestion list and then more specific list, and they went home at different times, and some families thought that you had to buy both lists. So, and that's what Betty, I believe that's what happened. I talked to Ryan about it. He went back and looked at it and he said, I can see how that happened. So it opened up a really good discussion for us to talk to teachers about, what are we asking parents to bring in, and why are we asking parents to bring that in?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think from personal experience this year, I viewed the short list that was provided as something that was needed, not something that would be nice. And so, we were concerned. We went out to Target, bought stuff to bring in, and it concerns me that you may have some other people that, we're fortunate enough that we can do that, but there's a lot of people that can't do that, and I also don't want it to fall on staff to have to do that. If there are things that we need to maintain and run the school, keep it clean and stuff, I would hope that would be in the budget and stuff that the board knows about, so that it's paid for through tax dollars primarily, and not through dependency on donations or going out to companies and asking for those sorts of things. That concerns me, that those sorts of time resources are being spent on that, when those resources should just be available and not have to be fraud about. So.
I talked to Janelle about that as well. We also did another great survey that I put out to all the staff, asking specifically, do you spend your own money on classroom supplies and things, and why? And the overwhelming response was, yes, I do. And there was 2 main reasons why. There was 100 reasons why, but there were 2 that really stood out. Like over 25% of people answered this way. One is that they have an idea and they just want to go get it because it's easier to go buy it for themselves, and they can't wait. And something sparked your imagination on a Tuesday, and you want to do a project on a Wednesday or Thursday. So you're going to go to Target and get your stuff to do that. And the other was that many staff did not feel like there was a easy process to go out and get reimbursed. And I talked to Janelle about this. So this is something we're working on, to how do we let staff know that there is a mechanism that if they talk to a principal and say, hey, I want to do this great project that came up because this kid came back from so-and-so and brought this and it connects, can I go out and buy some of these things and be reimbursed for? It's not necessarily a lack of funds, it's a lack of process. It's a lack of understanding on how to do it efficiently and not have to wait for a very long process. So the conversation really sparked a lot of important conversations for us.
Okay.
I just want to share for perspective that this is many years ago, but when I was in 3rd grade, I moved from Richmond, Virginia to Troy, New Hampshire, and I was amazed when I sat down at my desk and there was like a ruler in there and a couple of pencils and pencil top erasers. Like, you never saw those, and like it was all full of the stuff that I needed. And having come from Virginia, kids don't get anything to go to school. They have to buy it all. You have to bring every single thing. You don't even get pencils at school. And that's that way in a lot of other states. So we're fortunate to live here in New Hampshire where the school system does provide a lot of supplies for our kiddos.
How many years ago was that?
It was many years ago. It was 30 years ago. Thanks very much for asking. Kristen.
And I'd just like to say to Nick, as a parent, I had a very different experience where I would ask the teachers, can I bring in anything? And they'd always say, no, we have everything. So I don't know if that's an Emerson school thing or what. And the one time after bugging them many times, I did get in a little newsletter, if you would like to bring in something, you can bring in tissues or something like that. So I think might just be a communication issue.
Okay.
Scott.
So it does sound like there's a communications thing you're working on.
Yep.
I think we also, when we saw the survey results, we also saw some disparity in expectations around the purchasing process was affecting how teachers go about what they choose to purchase or how they choose to purchase.
And some have been told no a lot of times in the past, and they were afraid to be told no
Yeah,
again.
so once bitten, twice shy, right, on the
Yep.
process, so
Absolutely.
that's a factor. But I don't think we've ever set a standard or a policy or a what have you that defines, you know, what we're gonna ask families to provide, right? And what we do about that when a family can't afford from a supply. So if one teacher is saying, you need 4 binders, 25 different colored pencils, and 19 other things, but another teacher has a different approach, we might be all over the map on that, and we're sending a mixed message, not just across grade, but even across teachers within a grade.
Yep. So that, and that mostly is a 7th and 8th grade thing. And I talked to them about that. And I said, what about the kids who can't get this? You know, you guys know that I do Title I in the homeless as well. So my eyes have been very much open to that situation, more than I ever thought they would be. And they said, oh, no, we help provide it. And I said, yeah, but are you providing the same stuff? Because you're telling the kids to go out and buy a 5-star. Are you giving them a 5-star? Or are you giving them a Staples Special? You know, notebook, are they going to have the plastic cover or not? So this is really an important conversation about that and how we do that. So it is absolutely something that we are talking about. But it's really only 7th and 8th grade where that big supply list goes home right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other discussion on this?
Yes.
Brian.
So, have we gone back to teachers and staff and asked, you know, if you have been told no, do you get an explanation? You know, and is the criteria for getting reimbursed the same at every school? And my guess, you know, from my own experience, you know, in a similar role, if you have 10 people overseeing, you know, that process, then you get a different answer from all 10 people, right? As far as you might give me reimbursement for this, but you might not reimburse me for this. And you know, one might say maybe later. So my first part is consistency. If there is any, is that ever a conversation? Because, you know, my wife teaches, and I know how much money, you know, she spent on her own classroom. So although I'm sensitive to what we ask families for, I like being asked. I have no problem, you know, I feel good about giving like that. It makes us feel good, you know, to be able to provide. And I would agree with Nick, you know, we're able to do that. I don't expect anybody to, but I almost feel like the bigger conversation here is about how much teachers are feeling like they have to provide for their own classroom and what the mechanism is to invite people to come back to their building principal or someone else and say, okay, we understand that this is a big topic of conversation and it occurs a lot. We want to make it easier. We want to promote you to come and say, this is what I've done. This is what we can do for you. Yeah. To me, I almost think there needs to be a more defined policy on what the criteria is for getting reimbursed to do that. I mean, if people have been told no, like say a teacher wants to paint a classroom, do they get told no?
Sometimes.
And I'm not talking about somebody who wants to repaint their classroom every year. You know, maybe a teacher changes classrooms and they want to make it their own, you know, their home that they spend 5 days a week in.
I think historically we've been consistently inconsistent. And I think that, you know, when Janelle and I started talking about this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't know if you want to speak to it. But, you know, Janelle was like, wait, you don't have a process for that? She was very surprised by that. And I think that's something that, you know, with Janelle here now, we'll move forward and develop a process that's very clear and consistent across the district and allows an appropriate level of approval to do it responsibly.
Betty?
Yeah, and I just thank Jeremy for pursuing this whole thing of wish list versus demanding tone to things, because it just seemed like such a mixed message when we have a space in this building dedicated to handing out backpacks of food for the 68 hours that kids are away from here. And on the other hand, they're also getting this list that was $50, $80, $90 worth of stuff. And those are the very kids that weren't going to be able to afford a penny of it.
Right.
And so I'm just really glad if we're working on a clearer message and a clearer way of making sure really needy kids are getting what they need.
Nick, thank you for bringing this
Yep.
up. And Jeremy, thank you so much for pulling together the valuable information as quickly as you did. I think that we learned things that we didn't know we were going to learn. That's really
Absolutely.
cool. Janelle?
Just to go back to what Brian was saying, I know it's a little bit off the topic of supplies, but we do have a rotation of painting a certain number of rooms at each school each summer. We were getting closer to school starting, and Lori and Emerson said, you know, I had a teacher move into this room and it really does need to be painted. And I was glad she brought it to my attention, and we were able to get the custodial staff to paint that room before school started. So I think once the principals have the message that, you know, maybe things are working a little bit differently than they had in the past, it will also get to their staff, and we can support everybody better.
Can we hold off on revisiting this for next agenda and maybe just wait a while to see what kind of progress we've made over the next couple of
Yep.
months? Because the next time this is really going to hit us is maybe when the new semester starts, right? Particularly for middle school, high school, they're moving into new classes, right? So right about that time frame?
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
Scott?
I'm in favor of the waiting for the reasons you described, but I'm also wanting to keep the finger on the pulse of this for the sake of budget. Because if we believe that we should start funding from budget some element of student supplies, right, to combat the issue of poorer families in our district not being able to afford what students need, then I think we should tackle it in it, at least in the timing of the budget.
Okay.
I you know, I don't know if Janelle will agree, but from what I'm understanding, what I'm saying, it's a lack of process, not a lack of money.
Okay.
And we have supply closets if we need them. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, all the schools have supply budgets, and
Okay.
so I'm happy you guys brought it, though, because it's making us look at that process.
All right. The next item that we have is parent requests for student attendance at
Oh,
district.
one more,
schools.
just
Oh,
one.
sorry. go
Sorry.
ahead.
Relative to that, I think one of the, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if there are things that are outside the normal supply closet stock that we feel need to be included in the budget, I think that's something that we would need to consider if there's additional monies that are required for that.
First, we need the teachers to tell the principals and for the principals to ask for it in their budgets.
Yeah, I just wonder if maybe we're just so far down one road with so many teachers who believe that they need to because there's just no way they're ever going to get approved because they're no longer asking, right? Do we just need to push a reset on the message? And here we're talking about supplies. I think that's all
Yep.
good conversation. But there's also those responses we saw in the survey where teachers are spending their own money on curriculum material because it's faster, because they think they're going to hear the word no, or because they're trying to be spontaneous and creative, you know, mid-year, right? It's not
Right.
something they planned for.
So they go out and they buy their own salt and cream of tartar because they want to do Play-Doh tomorrow or something like that. And then it adds up after a while.
Yeah, yeah. So I would just love to continue hearing more on this so that we're sure that, at the very least, teachers hear the right message about how to engage in the process. And if that then leads to a legitimate budget question, then let's take that on.
All right. Parent requests for student attendance at district schools. I can tell you where this came from, but we're not going to talk about it tonight. Karen Wheeler gave Lisa a call. She was concerned that Gilsum School has some capacity perhaps to take on these kiddos that are in the very huge first and second grades that are in Troy and Emerson schools, or even Cutler or Mount Caesar. She wants to know how many of those parents requested attendance at Gilsum School and were turned down because Gilsum School is at capacity. At capacity. Is Gilsum School really at capacity? So that was her question to Lisa Witt. I think Lisa knows the answer to that, and she's prepared to bring it to us, but we're not going to hear that tonight.
Okay.
Meeting minutes from September 18th. We're looking at the public meeting minutes first. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Move the minutes as written.
Second.
The second came from Betty. Any comments? The formatting got a little funny in this. So, you know, the only thing is that we have level 1 and level 2, they're all numbers instead of moving from numbers to alpha.
Well, I'm on a new computer.
Oh, you got a new computer?
Actually, you got a new computer. Yeah.
Okay. It's not a big deal, the content's all good. No, it just when you indent, you would expect for it to move from point number 2 to A, B under point 2 instead of 1 and 2 under point 2. If that makes sense, I mean. Not a big deal.
Can I make a motion that we supply our
Secretary.
Stenographer,
note
recording
taker
secretary.
with whatever supplies she needs, if she needs a computer, a printer, whatever she needs?
Careful, you might have to buy that yourself.
Yeah.
I got
And then
teachers
seek
who'll pay for
reimbursement,
it.
I've heard that's tough.
I think I'm supposed to have a Chromebook, but I think Neil just forgot.
So we have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we'll take the second from Karen.
Wait, you guys.
I do not agree with whatever she wants.
I think realistically, what he was trying to say is let's provide the poor woman a
The
computer,
tools
please.
to do the job.
Typewriter.
The old idea.
All right.
What is this, stenograph?
We don't teach it anymore. I don't know who would.
Is there further discussion on this?
Who's the
No.
second?
The second was Karen.
Thank you.
With the superintendent not here, I don't know who we direct that to.
Oh, we're in the
but-
middle of.
I'm writing it all down. I bring
You're
it.
getting it all.
I think if we just, she'll let Chris Sifrick know, and Chris will issue you a Chromebook, just like everyone else. I apologize that I went overlooked.
How about a regular?
Can we make sure,
I don't like
if she prefers to use,
Find it easy to use.
you know, a PC,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Computer I
true.
have is fine, the one I have is fine.
you shouldn't have to use your one from home, though.
I'm not comfortable with that. 'Cause she's also.
So is your concern that our non-public meeting minutes are stored on the hard drive of our
That is
personal
one of
computer?
them. That's gonna be one of them.
True. That's how we all get Chromebooks.
Right, just under discussion, do you like Chromebooks, or do you prefer something more like a traditional laptop?
That's all I have is laptops.
Yeah.
That's what I've been using, but
Use Microsoft Word. Yeah.
We'll take that
PC.
friendly.
A PC? All right.
These are great for reading notes. Not so great for working.
All right, so where we're at right now is that,
All in favor?
we need to restate the motion before I ask.
You want me to restate
I
it?
believe it said, give the woman a
I would-
laptop.
All right, come on,
Give her
guys.
what you want.
I would make the motion to supply the board secretary with the appropriate computer that she needs to complete the job that we have tasked her with.
Super secure.
That would include Microsoft Word.
And
And
accessible to the internal intranet.
and accessibility to the internal internet.
All right.
Do this.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
So we were already in the middle of a motion.
That was just restating the motion.
No, I mean, we're still in the middle of the motion on the minutes, aren't we?
So I gotta say
Thank
that
God
again.
Neil's not here. Any more discussion on the minutes?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So that part where I said, thank God Neil's not here, you can put it in the minutes if you want to.
It's on camera.
We'll see if he really reads them. All right. Now, motion on the manifest. Betty, do you have that number?
I do. I'd like to move the manifest in the amount of $1,903,032.99, and this is for the 18-19 year.
Thank you very much. Is there a second
Second.
on that? Second was from Winston. Just under discussion, I want to say thank you so much, Janelle, for taking your time to explain how to read the manifest to several of the board members before the meeting. I learned stuff.
And it was the
Yes,
total.
thank you.
It
My
was,
pleasure.
it was, yeah, that was really great. Thank you very much for that.
Welcome.
Winston?
In our packet, we had an announcement about blue ribbon schools.
Can
And
we vote on the
Troy
manifest?
Elementary
We'll get
was-
there in just a second.
Pardon?
We have to finish voting.
Yeah, let's vote on the manifest. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I didn't hear you.
Abstentions? That's all right.
And Janelle, if I'm correct, there was no 18-17.
That's right.
Go ahead, Winston.
In our packet, we had blue ribbon schools announcement. And Troy Elementary was listed on the list twice on the second page. And there were some forms to fill out, and some type of gathering is going to be offered to celebrate this on Friday, October 26th. And I just wondered what went with this blue ribbon and how Troy got involved and other schools didn't. Evidently, there's a cost to it if you go. Said the superintendent would receive forms. And in fact, if they've got a blue ribbon school, we ought to be celebrating a little bit with Troy and let them know that we heard it.
This is the first I've seen this one. Kristen?
As for the Emerson PTCO, the Dr. Stone had also sent Emerson PTCO information about being a blue ribbon school, and we could go to this celebration as well, but Emerson PTCO decided not to do that. So I don't know if Emerson was supposed to be on there, and that's why Troy's on there twice, or if you didn't fill out the paperwork, you just weren't listed, if it's just some thing like that.
National merit thing.
I think it's like you
I don't know.
pay and you, it's for
picture in the book.
volunteering.
But 86 schools were named on that list.
This is not an issue of substance that's going to cause us to vote in any way. I think it's not. So I feel comfortable if Lisa wants to respond by email on what was the intent behind this. And then we'll share it verbally at the next school board meeting. I'm sure others are interested, but Winston,
Yeah, see if there's
she'll give you an answer.
We can do or not do.
Okay. Setting next meeting's agenda, here's what I have so far. When we are low on substitutes and pairs, are we still complying with IEPs? We're gonna talk about the School Safety Preparedness Task Force 2018 report, the motion on appraisals for district buildings, the Swansea Board request from the CRC, the ratio of what we pay Cheshire Career Center, or how that's calculated, asking legal counsel whether pooling and caps is okay for the funding formula, I'll report back on the New Hampshire School Boards Association training on board roles and responsibilities. We need to talk about unallocated funds. And then in the distant future, we'll talk about the school supplies again. And on a future education report, we'll talk about the schedule change and how that impacted Cheshire Career Center. Anything else that I missed?
Do you just want the whole ed report next week, to be CCC? Make that the ed report?
Sure.
Okay. I can
Sounds
talk about
reasonable.
schedule, I can talk about funding, I can talk about history.
Yep,
Yeah.
Can we get an update on the band fundraising?
that's already on there. Yep, I already filled it in.
I was actually going to ask because our band director is stuck it out for the night tonight. I don't know if that was intended for tonight.
Thanks. Yeah. So no, that didn't make it onto the agenda, and I'm sorry if there was some miscommunication, guys, but, no.
I enjoyed our humor tonight.
I spoke with Lisa, and she didn't feel like it was necessary for us to talk about the process by which you guys are raising funds, because you're doing just fine. You're not doing anything wrong. You know the rules, and we do need to check back with you to see how far you've gotten on your fundraising at the next meeting, so we have time to get you the rest of the money before you take off. Okay? So you will be on the agenda for next meeting. Yes. Yes. Rob?
I'd like to have on the agenda the consideration of a human resource director, of which some of that conversation may need to go into non-public under C.
The Human Resources Director conversation is the first meeting in November. It's already on the agenda because we had agreed as a board that we would see if it shows up in the drafts of the budget. And if it doesn't show up in the draft of the budget, then the board will activate and say, why didn't it show up in the draft of the budget? Yeah.
I think I remember that.
I'm done.
There was something else that we just talked about, band, okay. And it's already in the template, so. Anything else for next meeting? Very good. Public comments. You're welcome to speak if you'd like. How are you doing? Come on up and let us know how you're doing with fundraising.
You're compelling the public to speak here. Good thing Neil's not here.
Trolling for public comments, that's good.
I didn't
Do I need
mean
to
to
like state my
volatile
name
you.
and town and everything official? Rob Scrocky, Richmond. The band's doing well with fundraising. We completed our two biggest fundraisers, which was our advertising and donor search for banners on the football field. And then we also had our big green egg raffle with Hampshire Lumber. That prize was given away on Saturday, so that's really exciting. We had a successful homecoming overall. Got our first halftime show out of the way, so things are going well. Our total as of right now for all funds raised by students is $15,008. So we're making progress.
Nice. I'll tell you the real reason you're standing there.
Okay.
I love that you went around to the elementary schools. That was
Thank you.
amazing, and the kids loved it too, and I saw pictures, and they had so much fun. Noah came home, and he said, we had the Huskies here today. Did you guys know that the band went around to the elementary schools? Yes.
It was pretty cool. It's something we did last year with Jeremy's blessing, and I certainly thank him and the administration for allowing us to do that. But we did it as part of a homecoming thing last year, and then it turned into a pretty cool band recruitment thing too. So this year it was the best of both worlds, and I think everyone had a really great time.
It was amazing. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
You guys had a nice bonding time?
The band and I see them plenty.
Well, no, I'm right. I guess you travel together a lot. So I heard that you went to Papagallo's
Yes, we did.
and that the servers said they were very, very impressed that a group of teenagers could be so well behaved. So there's that. Thank you.
They were
Good
talking
job.
about us? No.
I was with them.
Yeah, the
They-
servers said that.
They were awesome. It was just, I was lucky enough to go out on tour that day with them and just had a blast, and I can't get over how well behaved and great the kids were at lunch, so.
Yeah.
Good job,
Had a good day.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
I just have one, Rob, if I could, please, sorry. What's the deadline for community companies to donate?
There's no deadline. Our payment for the trip is due November 1st, but there's certainly other things that we need support through, so, yeah.
Is it too late to get a banner on that trailer?
we're still working that part out.
I got you.
No.
It's never too late.
Bigger trailer.
All right, we have, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And members of the board, we have a need for one non-public under C, but we'll take a quick break. We'll let the cameras pull down, grab a snack, be back in 5, so we can get out of here.
Thank you, public.